The hero of this story is the son of the strongest necromancer in the entire universe. His whole childhood passed among the undead and his father's servants. He was tested and trained in the tower from his earliest years. But suddenly his parents disappeared and monster gates opened across the earth. Let's dive into this fascinating story of the rise of the new, strongest necromancer. But before we begin, let's explore the backstory of this world. In this new sequel to Solo Leveling, we dive into the existence of gods, these absolute entities who've been creating countless universes since ancient times. They're known as the Supreme Beings, and their job was to keep creating universes while chasing eternal life. In this endless cycle, they gave birth to tons of substances, like souls and laws of universe. But even with all this creation going on, some of these supreme beings got bored and decided to spice things up by watching their creations fight each other. To them, the chaos and destruction were pretty entertaining. Sure, this meant that their creations had to keep fighting in never-ending wars, dying, and being reborn over and over. But it was all part of the deal to keep the supreme beings amused. However, things took a turn when one of these supreme beings was actually killed by one of his own creations. When the supreme beings from other dimensions found out, they all gathered to observe this world that had lost its master. They were intrigued by the death of a fellow supreme being, especially since it was at the hands of his own creation. While they didn't really care about the death itself, they all shared a single greedy thought: whoever claims this newly ownerless power first will become its master. The story starts in a high school classroom, where Sung Soo-ho is excitedly bragging to his friends about getting a spot into prestigious Korea National University of Arts. His friends are shocked to hear this, having a hard time believing it. While Soo-ho is laughing and soaking up the moment, one friend starts tearing up because he has to repeat a year, and another friend is flabbergasted, wondering how Soo-ho got into such a top-notch art school with his lousy skills. But Soo-ho's joy takes a dive when he hears a familiar, unpleasant voice offering him a sarcastic congratulations. Well, he's your average school bully, and Soo-ho isn't thrilled to see him again. Instead of using the bully's real name, Soo-ho just addresses him with some random name, which really ticks the bully off. His face twists with anger as he snaps at our boy, letting him know his real name is Yoonchul. The bully then brings up that Soo-ho messed up his plans to take over the high school. But my guy shoots back that it's also thanks to him that this low-life bully even managed to graduate in the first place. Meanwhile, the rest of the students are feeling restless to see this bully acting up again. They're really frustrated that Yoonchul hasn't changed one bit and is still acting all cocky, even though they are just about to graduate. What's bothering them even more is that Yoonchul is trying to bully a poor kid who's lost his parents but still manages to put on a brave face. Finally, the patience of the bully wears thin, and he is about to land a punch over our boy's face. But instead, my guy delivers a knee smash right to the bully's filthy face, then annoyingly tells him to at least try acting like a decent human until graduation. Soo-ho then notices something weird about the redhead and quickly delivers a knee smash right to his face. Even though his knee breaks the bully's nose, the guy, however, remains cocky and nonchalantly claims that it did not even tickle. He then balls up his fist, and it starts burning with a strange energy. With a devilish glint in his eyes, he charges his fist to the max and swings a devastating punch right at Soo-ho's face. Soo-ho barely manages to step back, and the punch hits the nearby lockers instead. The single punch rattles Soo-ho's nerves, and the other students in the classroom are completely bewildered as well. It seems like the redhead himself doesn't even know how he just made a dent in the steel lockers. He's staring at himself in confusion while this strange aura radiates from his body. Even Soo-ho has no idea how to handle this situation. 2 years have passed since that day, and our boy, Sung Soo-ho, is now a second-year university student. As he walks across campus, he notices a commotion nearby. Workers are surrounding a strange portal, and an instructor is telling everyone that all lessons in the main building have been moved to the annex building. The reason? Hunters are going in to deal with the monsters coming through the portal. A guy in a suit asks one of the workers how long the hunters have been inside. The worker replies that it's been just over 8 hours. Since the gate is rated D rank, there's a good chance the hunters will be out soon. While Soo-ho stands quietly, the announcement keeps blaring, and students are talking about whether the school might get destroyed. Some reassure others that the hunters will handle it. It seems that the appearance of a gate isn't that unusual, which is why Soo-ho isn't too freaked out about it. You see, about 3 years ago, these portals called gates started showing up everywhere, and the world went through some major changes. The gates are basically shortcuts to dungeons, and once they are opened, monsters from these dungeons would spill out and start causing trouble. But it wasn't just the monsters that shook things up. People started developing special abilities too. These folks, known as the Awakened, could use mana and had all sorts of cool powers. The world was in chaos, and everyone thought it would last forever. Then, an Awakened named Jinchul came along. He set up the Hunter Association, brought together other Awakened, and created a job called hunters. Thanks to them, the chaos got sorted out way faster than anyone expected. Now people are split into awakened and non-awakened. Since the non-awakened folks don't have the same perks as the awakened, they have to work like crazy just to make a name for themselves. Meanwhile, the awakened can pretty much get whatever they want with their powers. It didn't take long for the non-awakened, who sometimes feel like they're just ants in comparison, to see their own limits. No matter how hard they work, they can't bridge the gap between themselves and even a lowly E-rank awakened. Even though hunters can fight off the monsters from the gates and prevent the world from falling apart, it's clear that without the awakened, the non-awakened wouldn't survive. Conversely, the awakened can manage just fine without the non-awakened. Because of this, everyone is grateful to the hunters, and it's thanks to them that non-awakened people like Suho can live a relatively peaceful life and go about their daily routines. But for Suho, there's also a sense of unease. He feels insecure about himself and wonders if he's becoming too accustomed to not being able to get what he wants. He reflects on the loss of his parents and how his survival depends on others. Even though he once felt he could achieve anything, that confidence has faded, leaving him with a sense of powerlessness. He remembers his mother's voice telling him he resembles his father and wonders how his father would have handled this feeling of helplessness. Suddenly, Suho is jolted by what sounds like his father calling him. When he snaps out of his thoughts, he sees his teacher standing behind him. The teacher compliments Suho on his drawing, which is pretty impressive. Suho just shrugs and says he drew it based on how he felt. But the teacher is intrigued by the creative drawing of an ant that has a human-like stature. To all of us, it's clear what the drawing represents, but Suho has no clue why he ended up drawing such a creepy thing. Meanwhile, outside the campus, hunters have started emerging from the portal. They all look pretty confident, which is a dead giveaway that their raid was a total success. The site worker gives a shout out to Hunter Kim for his great work, and Kim replies that everything went smoothly without a hitch. He further mentions they've got some new info for the Hunter Association. Apparently, they came across a new type of monster they'd never seen before. Basically a humanoid creature that spits blue flames from its eyes and mouth and attacks with claws and fangs. He admits that the creature managed to graze his body, but it was nothing serious. Well, it seems like Hunter Kim might have been underestimating things a little, because the wound from that humanoid monster starts reacting badly. He suddenly feels a stinging pain spreading all over his body, making him writhe in agony. His sword drops from his hands, and even the site worker notices something seriously off with Kim. Right on cue, this muscular hunter transforms into a grotesque goblin, spewing the same blue flames. He lunges at the worker, tearing off his chest with a single bite, creating a gruesome mess that sends a chill down everyone's spine. The other hunters and bystanders are horrified. One of the hunters quickly points out that these blue flames are identical to those used by the monsters in the dungeon. Kim, now a horrific creature himself, lunges at his fellow hunter and bites off his head as if it's no big deal. Panic erupts as people start fleeing in all directions, desperately trying to save their lives. Unfortunately, the people bitten by Kim also transform into blue flame monsters and begin attacking others, spreading chaos even further. The screams are so loud they can be heard inside the building, and people quickly gather around the windows, trying to see what's going on. When Suho looks outside, he sees a bloody mess where people are attacking each other, their minds apparently taken over by the same blue energy. It doesn't take long for the students to realize that these people have turned into monsters. Seeing the dungeon break out, the students start panicking and urge their instructor to step up, since he's an awakened too. But the teacher quickly reminds them that he's only an E-rank hunter. Suddenly, Suho spots the same blue flame monster right above the campus floor. The monster takes its stance, and before it can leap inside through the window where all the students are gathered, Suho shouts for everyone to run away quickly. Before anyone can react, the monster leaps inside through the window and knocks one of the students out immediately, and Suho quickly ducks down to save himself. The monster opens its mouth, spewing blue flames as it starts devouring the student it just took down. The sight is so gruesome that other students are practically crapping their pants. Suho bolts for the exit but then notices a fellow student, injured with busted legs from the monster's crash, and she is unable to move. He freezes at her desperate pleas for help, but after a moment, he closes his eyes and starts running out, reassuring her he'll get the hunters here to help. Deep down, Suho knows he's just lying to her. Leaving her behind means certain death, and he's painfully aware of his own limitations as a non-awakened. But he takes a deep breath, decides not to blame his powerlessness, and tells himself he needs to find something he can do. Suho wonders what his father would have done in this situation. As he imagines his father in his mind, we see that the monster is done chomping down on the student it had taken out. Now, it's eyeing the injured girl on the floor, who's basically lying there, helpless and ready to be slaughtered like a lamb. Tears flow down her face as she takes a final look at the death looming over her. In the next moment, the monster goes wild and sprints toward her like a rabid dog. Just as it's about to take a bite with its filthy face, Suho grabs a fire extinguisher and smashes it into the monster face. And by the look in his eyes, it's like he's figured out what his father would have done, and he's doing exactly just that. Just as Suho's resolve sparks inside him, the system begins to boot up. The first notification is an alert saying he's met all the requirements to complete a secret quest titled Courage of the Weak. Before we dive into what's happening, let's rewind a bit. Suho narrates that he had a dream a long time ago that felt like a game. In the dream, he had to level up and keep fighting monsters that got stronger with each floor. As the monsters became tougher, he had to get stronger too. After tons of challenges, he finally faced the final boss on the highest floor. The boss was super powerful, and Suho felt a mix of envy and awe at its strength. Strangely, he felt a connection to the boss, even though it was his enemy. Later, he realized that the boss was actually his father. As Suho has this realization, he understands that his dream was basically a reflection of his father's life. He was just living out a part of his father's experiences in his dream. He spots the fire extinguisher nearby, grabs it quickly, and rushes back into the room. He lands a solid hit on the monster's face, sending it tumbling backward. Even though he hit the monster right in the face, he doesn't have any mana, so his attack isn't very effective against a magic beast, and he has no idea what to do next. But then, Suho's eyes widen in disbelief as he sees the monster and the terrified girl frozen in place, as if time itself has stopped. Just then, a system window pops up with a notification saying he's met the requirements to complete the secret quest, Courage of the Weak, and is now eligible to become a player. The system asks if he wants to accept. His mind flashes back to his dream, and he realizes that if he can fight this monster like his father did, it's a no-brainer to press the accept button. With that settled, he confirms his choice, and a bright light fills the room as he evolves into an awakened. The next moment, the system announces that he's officially become a player. Notifications start popping up everywhere, highlighting current quests, rewards, and more. We also notice some extra effects from the system, one of which is called longevity. This perk can fight off all diseases, poisons, and status effects, and sleeping will significantly boost his regeneration abilities. Suho's status window appears before his eyes, and seeing this game-like status makes him smile. It's clear that he's finally awakened. His current quest is to defeat the Mistburn, and he'll level up if he succeeds. Once Suho is awakened, time resumes, and he sees clearly that this monster is a D-rank awakened Mistburn. He quickly tells the girl to run away while the monster starts advancing towards him. The two other students who were bitten have also turned into Mistburn monsters. As the monsters lunge at him, Suho's eyes burn bright with determination. He smashes one of them right in the face with the fire extinguisher, but it's clear that a simple hit isn't going to cut it. So he balls up his fist, gathers his energy, and apologizes to the girl before delivering a brutal blow. She flies into the nearby wall and demolishes it on impact. Looks like Suho didn't expect his punch to send the monster flying like that, but he's not complaining. In fact, he's pretty blown away to see he squashed that monster with a single hit. Another monster lunges at him, but Suho responds with a solid kick right into its belly, sending it crashing down. The system announces that the unawakened Mistburner has been defeated, and with that kill, Suho levels up. A new quest pops up, telling him to take down the remaining Mistburners. Soon enough, Suho takes out the other unawakened Mistburners. With all those monsters biting the dust, he's convinced he's finally awakened. He then delivers a devastating punch to an awakened Mistburner. However, this monster doesn't even flinch from the blow, and Suho starts feeling anxious as he realizes this beast might be tougher than he thought. The monster quickly retaliates with its fierce claws, slashing across Suho's chest like it's no big deal. After taking the hit, Suho quickly distances himself by pressing his foot against the monster's chest. As he looks at the fatal wound on his chest, he realizes he's at risk of turning into one of these magic beasts. Right on cue, the system announces a harmful status effect has been detected in his spirit, but it's lifted due to the effects of longevity. At that moment, his injuries start to heal, and he remembers that his longevity skill was activated. The monster lunges at him again, pinning him to the ground. It starts to open its disgusting mouth while Suho struggles to push the beast away. Just when Suho thinks he's about to be overpowered, he remembers the stat points he earned from defeating the other unawakened monsters. He quickly dumps all 3 points into his strength, giving him the boost he needs to push the monster away like a ragdoll. The monster quickly regains its footing but is met with a solid punch to the face from Suho. Even with the extra strength, Suho realizes it's still not enough to take down the monster. The beast keeps slashing at his chest, leaving him no choice but to dump all his remaining points into strength. His fists are soon surrounded by a fiery aura as he delivers a brutal punch that turns the monster's face into a complete mess. It looks like Suho has found the ultimate cheat system in this world. While most awakened have their ranks set upon awakening and can't get stronger, Suho can keep grinding for more points and become indefinitely powerful. Once he turns the monster's chest into smithereens with his relentless punches, he winds up for one last swing, putting every ounce of power into it. That final punch sends the monster crashing into the wall behind it, and the wall crumbles from the impact. The beast is literally torn to bits, like a tattered cloth. With a final push, the monster hits the ground, while Suho is left huffing and puffing after all the action. The system quickly announces that he has defeated the D-rank awakened Mistburn, and also has leveled up several times. Suho collapses to the ground due to exhaustion, and looks at his hand, savoring his hard-earned victory. He clenches his fist with newfound confidence, reminding himself that he's finally become an awakened. A smile spreads across his face as he declares that he's no longer powerless, and is now ready to save the people of this world and tackle the crisis head-on. Just as he's pumped up and ready to take on more monsters, another mist beast charges toward the building. With a mighty leap, it comes flying toward the top floor, aiming straight for Suho. The monster, wielding a giant sword, is revealed to be a C-rank awakened Mistburn. Before Suho can react, the beast crashes its sword down, causing a massive explosion that fills the area with dust, smoke, and debris. Meanwhile, the emergency horns are blaring all over the city, announcing the dungeon break at Korea University of Arts, and telling everyone to evacuate the area pronto. Back at the campus, more backup has shown up, but the platoon captain is feeling pretty frustrated. People are dying left and right, and all they can do is wait for the Hunter Association to send help. The soldier reports that the association is still trying to find a B rank or higher hunter to send over, which is why it is taking time. The irritated captain asks, "Wasn't this gate labeled as D rank from the start? So how come they need a B rank hunter to clear up the mess?" The soldier explains that the association is factoring in that hunters, including C rank hunter Kim Jong-soo, have been infected and are attacking the campus. They believe it's better to send a B rank or higher hunter to handle this situation. Back in the building, Suho watches as the C rank monster hunter casually strolls toward him. He's losing his mind, thinking about how this giant just leaped from the ground floor to the top floor like it was nothing. This monster is way fiercer and different from the ones he's faced before. Not only is it C rank, but it's also wielding a massive weapon, leaving our boy unsure if he can handle it. The monster swings its giant sword, and Suho ducks to avoid the blow. The swing is so powerful that it slices through nearby reinforced walls like they're made of paper. Suho isn't exactly thrilled about witnessing such a raw display of power. Meanwhile, the monster grins from ear to ear as he prepares to swing his sword again. Just as he's about to crush Suho with the sword's weight, Suho kicks the fire extinguisher right at the monster's face. The monster slices through it with his sword, and the extinguisher bursts, filling the room with a thick haze. Suho quickly uses the confusion to his advantage and makes a run for it. He figures he'll wait for more hunters to show up and just hold out until help arrives. The monster is still hot on Suho's heels, but then he spots something that makes his grin even wider. Suho is startled to see that the beast has stopped chasing him down, and when he turns around, he sees the beast ogling at the terrified female students who are huddled up on the ceiling, shaking in their boots, waiting for more hunters to arrive. But the monster is not waiting for any hunters to arrive though. He leaps out of the window with his giant sword aimed at the girls, and Suho can only stand there in horror. With a single brutal swing, the monster obliterates the girls into a gruesome mess of blood. Frustration boils over in Suho, making him clench his jaw. He steels himself with determination, leaps up to the ceiling, and lands a kick right into the monster's back. But his kick turns out to be nothing more than annoyance to the beast, who just swings his sword in response, slicing through the floor in the process. Seeing that rift opening up in the ground, our guy's pretty sure he's in for a rough time. Even one hit could get him killed, and he definitely doesn't want to end up sliced up like those other girls. But he's not about to let this monster go wild, so he dives in head first, throwing punches so fast he's basically a blur. The beast isn't holding back either. It's swinging its sword like a maniac, but my guy is dodging left and right like a ninja on a caffeine high. He keeps up a relentless assault, and after a serious punching session, he lands a knee right in the monster's filthy face. But the monster quickly swings its sword with its other hand, slicing across our guy's belly and making him gush blood. Before he can recover, the monster kicks him hard in the gut, sending him crashing down and making him cough up blood again. It's safe to say he might have all his bones shattered by now, and his rapidly dropping HP makes it painfully obvious that he's in big trouble. But hey, he's still got that one last HP point, as if the system's not ready to let him fall just yet. On the other hand, the beast grins maniacally after seeing his prey struggle like this. Despite his last remaining point of HP, Suho tries to stand, blood dripping from his face. The stakes are high, and the monster charges straight at him. The system announces that his entire body is out of commission, and he starts to collapse from fatigue. With the monster's sword mere inches away from crushing him, it seems like the end is near. But then, the air shatters like fragile glass, and a shadowy figure emerges from the rift. As the monster's sword is about to strike, the dark entity slashes down the monster's hand, saving our guy from his death at the last second. If we have to guess, we can confidently claim that this is Baru coming to the rescue. While Suho's consciousness fades, he catches a glimpse of the monster who just saved him, and it does not take him long to realize that this is the same ant he had always known. Meanwhile, Baru is beating himself up for being late, but he quickly heals our boy, making his injuries fade away, as if he has never been injured. The monster tries to get back up, but Baru growls in frustration, clearly ticked off at the pest that dared to hurt his king. With zero mercy, Baru obliterates the C-rank beast like it's just a watermelon at a shooting range. Then, another monster appears on the ceiling, ready to attack a poor guy holding a broom, tears streaming down his face as he faces his doom. But, not surprisingly, this monster meets the same fate as its friend, getting obliterated into bits and pieces. Baru dispatches all the remaining monsters with his sharp claws, popping them like party balloons. Guts and heads are flying everywhere, and the remaining monsters have no idea where the attacks are coming from. In just a few seconds, the entire campus is cleared of monsters. A bright light ripples through the area as Baru collapses to his knees, finally able to greet his master again. But before we can see their reunion, the scene shifts to the past, where we find our junior Suho drawing ants, and not just one, but he already has several sketches already drawn. Suddenly Baru shows up, and while holding one of the drawings, he asks his young monarch if he's still drawing portraits of someone like him. Baru is absolutely on the brink of tears, overwhelmed by the sight of how much his young master adores him. Then, just as it's all getting emotional, our boy opens his eyes and realizes he's in an infirmary. Apparently it's not an infirmary but a hospital, and our boy's concerned uncle is laying into him, asking how on earth he ended up in such a mess. He insists that our boy should have a few guards with him because this world is beyond help. It turns out his uncle's worries are justified. By the time Suho opens his eyes, 2 days have passed since the incident. The event has been a hot topic worldwide due to the numerous casualties. What's even more shocking is the discovery of mist burns, the monsters that can infect even hunters and turn them into monsters themselves. The Hunter Association decided not to disclose this to the public, despite the incident happening in the middle of the city. When the hunters arrived at the scene, all the mist-burn monsters in the university had already been chopped up like veggies by an unknown force. Some eyewitnesses even claimed that the monsters just suddenly burst and exploded right before their eyes. Suho turns off the TV, feeling relieved that his awakening wasn't just a dream. On top of that, he's now an awakener who grows stronger as he levels up. But he is still curious about one thing. He clearly remembers that he was cut by a C-rank mist burn, so how is he still alive? Just then, Baru sneaks up and greets the young monarch. But soon, Baru erupts into tears, overwhelmed with emotion after meeting his young master such a long time apart. He's deeply moved to see how his monarch has grown up so wonderfully, and he can't keep his emotions in check. The sight of his old friend brings back a flood of childhood memories for Suho. He vividly recalls how Baru cared for him like a loving parent and raised him pretty well, but he can't understand why he didn't remember Baru until now. As Baru wipes away his tears, he explains that he crossed dimensions to find our boy. Meanwhile, Suho is still trying to wrap his head around why this dark creature was around when he was younger. He also recalls that this ant wasn't always this small before. In response, Baru explains that he shrank because crossing dimensions used up a lot of his mana. The system window labels Baru as level 1 private grade, but the ant quickly gets agitated. He curses the trash system for downgrading him to private grade when he's actually a martial grade. Suho then stretches himself and thanks Baru for saving his life, which makes the ant blush. Baru then reminds him that even though he's tiny now, he's a skilled healer. He then reveals that his main goal for coming here was to release Suho's seal, but he's quite surprised to see that our boy managed to unseal his abilities by himself. Suho then asks if the seal is related to the dream he had. Baru confirms, saying that while Suho might think it was just a dream, everything he experienced was real. He also tells Suho he's much stronger now than when they last fought. He then further explains that the Great Shadow Monarch, Sung Jin-woo, who is our boy's father, of course, sealed Suho's powers, and as well as memories to give him a normal life. The mention of his father hits Suho hard. He grabs Baru and demands to know how he's connected to his dad, what he knows about him, and why he was left behind by his father. Baru then stammers out that our boy's father did not leave him behind or anything. He just merely went to outer space. Well, this just makes Suho even more curious, and asks what in the hell does this outer space thing even is. Baru scratches his head, trying to figure out how to explain. Then he uses his shadows to create a few illustrations and says that the Great Shadow Monarch, Sung Jin-woo, went to outer space to fight off invaders trying to take over the world. Basically, Suho's dad is still out there, keeping the world safe. Beru adds that Sung Jinwoo is up against the Atarim, who are known as outer space gods. He goes on to explain that the Atarim are sending their apostles to invade, and before coming to Earth, Beru claims he took down a bunch of enemies himself as well. Not to mention, the gates and monsters showing up on Earth are all the result of this ongoing war. Suho asks if his mom went with his dad, and Beru says no. Suho then reveals that his mom went missing the same day his dad did, so he thought they might be together. Suddenly, Beru starts freaking out, running around frantically. He realizes with a jolt that Miss Hein is missing too, and mutters that the Itarim's apostles must have set a nasty trap for her. Suho then asks if these Atarim bastards are the reason his parents can't come back. Beru asks if Suho wants to meet them. Suho's hand shakes with frustration and determination as he makes it clear he definitely wants to meet them, because he has been alone for so many years already. Beru says there's only one way to make this happen. His dad might be stuck in outer space for a while because of the war, but Suho can find and rescue his mom once he gets stronger. So Beru says it's time to start grinding for some leveling up. As soon as Beru says this, a system window pops up with a quest called the Trial of the Shadow. The system goes on about how Suho is the son of the Great Shadow Monarch, but his innate talents are sealed. To unlock that power, he'll need to prove himself by entering the Shadow Dungeon and showing what he's made of. The key Suho is holding is known as the Shadow Dungeon key, and its rarity is unknown. To activate it, he has to stick the key into his shadow. As soon as he pushes the key against his shadow on the wall, a portal pops open. Beru tells him to go ahead and enter, claiming it will help him unlock all the power that's rightfully his. Suho takes a moment to reflect. All this talk about outer space, the war with gods, and the Shadow Monarch feels like a bunch of tall tales right now. But if getting stronger is the only way to meet his parents, he's ready to level up as much as he can. The scene shifts to the past, where we see Suho's dad tells Beru to head to Earth and lift his son's seal because the Atarim's invasion might have influence on Earth as well. He tells Beru to restore Suho's powers and memories and keep Earth safe. And after that, Beru's got the freedom to handle things as he sees fit. Back in the present, Beru makes his final decision and decides to stick around with our boy and keep an eye on his progress. Once they step through the portal, they land on the other side, and Beru explains that this place is the land of the dead, where the living can't enter without permission from the master. This place is called the Shadow Dungeon. Suho's first impression of this place isn't great, as it looks more like a ruined city than a dungeon. But there's something oddly familiar about it. Just then, a system window pops up in front of him, saying the quest is to survive in the Shadow Dungeon. The denizens here won't accept anyone weak as the master of this land, so Suho gotta survive for the next 4 hours to prove his worth, and the timer starts now. Suho is kind of bummed that just staying here for 4 hours is the main goal. But Beru quickly warns him to keep his guard up because things are about to get rough. Well, it seems like the trouble has officially arrived. A monster tries to sneak up on our hero from behind, but Suho quickly delivers a powerful kick right into the monster's guts, and he seems really surprised by the sudden ambush by this monster. The kick seems to hurt quite a lot, but it's not enough to take the goblin down. Suho is intrigued by the sight of the goblin scout, and Beru quickly explains that seeing a scout likely means there are more of these creatures nearby. Hearing this, my guy jumps into action, knowing he needs to handle this critter before he calls his other allies for backup. Beru quickly tells him not to rush in recklessly, but Suho, however, charges anyway. Before the goblin can blow the horn, my guy appears right in front of him, like a reaper coming to collect souls. He slaps the goblin's hand, knocking the axe out of its grip, grabs the weapon, and then smashes the goblin's head with its own axe. Once the goblin's out for good, Suho explains that since the goblin's name tag was just white, which meant the monster was weaker than him, and stronger monsters always have colored name tags. While they're walking around, they spot another goblin who quickly blows the horn. My guy is pretty pissed, realizing he overlooked this scout. Right on cue, a bunch of furious goblins show up, and one even has a yellow name tag. Seeing the horde, Suho is about to crap his pants, and asks Beru if he's going to help. Beru, though it pains him to say it, explains that being so far from the monarch means his mana isn't coming back, so he can't risk losing any strength. Plus, if he jumps into the fight, the experience he'd get would drop a lot, which could ruin the whole dungeon clearing plan. The goblins close in on Suho, charging at him like wild green monsters. But my guy channels his aura, yanks the axe out of the dead goblin's skull, and starts swinging it with such speed and precision that the goblins are getting cut down left and right, like they're being thrown into a blender. Well, it looks like Suho is getting the hang of his undiscovered skills. Controlling things like this makes it seem like he's using an invisible hand, which is quite interesting to say the least. The system window pops up, showing that this skill is called Ruler's Authority, currently at level 1, and it doesn't require any mana to use. and he can physically control objects without touching them. Suddenly, a sneaky goblin tries to take him down with an arrow attack. Suho catches the arrow mid-air, surprised to see an archer-type goblin. Using his ruler's authority skill, he quickly makes a makeshift bow and shoots the arrow right back, nailing the goblin in the head with godly precision. Beru watches in fascination, clearly impressed by Suho's adaptability. He remembers that the young monarch's childhood was like the start of a legendary hero's tale. Even back then, Suho could use ruler's authority, a power he inherited from his father. But that power was meant to destroy everything, which was more of a hindrance in a peaceful world. But now, with the Itaram apostles invading Earth, Suho has no reason to hold back, and he can shine bright in the battlefields with his destructive skill. As Suho keeps slashing down monsters and racking up levels, he also learns that with his ruler's authority, he can only carry up to 10 kilograms. Just as he's thinking about this, a sneaky goblin takes its chance and stabs him in the back. The goblin laughs creepily after the cowardly attack from behind, but Suho quickly shuts it up with a punch that obliterates its teeth and facial features in one devastating blow. As more goblins start to swarm him, Beru can't help but feel a bit scared for his master. That's when one of the highest-ranking goblins shows up, and its colored name tag makes it clear this one is different from the rest. Suho quickly yanks the dagger from his back, losing 30 HP in the process. As soon as the dagger is out, the other goblins pounce on him like hungry hounds. Despite the pain, he swings the dagger and throws it with such godly speed that it pierces through every goblin in the area, nailing the most powerful one right in the center. Suho seems to be loving every second of the fight, feeling more alive than ever. He's attacked again, making his HP drop even more, but he uses his ruler's authority to slash down the goblins like they're nothing. As the battle goes on, he keeps piling up bodies, though his reckless fighting style causes his HP to plummet. But he doesn't back down. When he finally reaches the high-level goblin, he starts smashing away, and the system goes wild with notifications popping up everywhere, announcing the levels he's climbing. Once the bloodbath is over, all that's left are bodies scattered around like trash. Our boy finally takes a breather after so much fighting, and it looks like his 4-hour survival mark has ended, signaling the successful completion of the quest. Beru starts clapping for his young master, saying he never doubted him for a second and knew he would breeze through this trial. Another system notification arrives, giving him the choice to accept the reward for completing the quest. Without hesitation, he tells the system to show him what he's getting. The system quickly displays that he will receive a rune stone, which can be used to learn a skill called shadow extraction. Beru is quite excited at the prospect of Suho getting this new skill. Suho checks out his injuries and finds he's actually unharmed. He remembers picking up a new skill called resilience during the fight. It turns out he's been getting skills on top of the leveling system he got when he awakened. Our boy can't help but feel like he's a cheat character with this level-up mechanism and all the free skills he's getting. Beru then reveals that this level-up mechanism is based on the system the monarch used in a past life. It's a support system designed to ensure Suho's safety as he grows. To put it simply, Beru reminds him that he's probably the only hunter in the world born with such an advantage. Suho isn't sure if that's supposed to be a compliment, but he proceeds to accept the rune stone reward anyway. Once he has the stone in hand, he quickly absorbs it as instructed by the system. The system window pops up, showing that shadow extraction doesn't require any mana to use. It pulls mana from a recently deceased body and turns it into a shadow soldier. The failure rate goes up depending on the target's stats and how long they've been dead. Beru explains that this skill turns dead corpses into soldiers, just like himself. Shadow extraction is basically the essence of the authority that created the Shadow Monarch, Lord Sung Jinwoo. Suho's still unsure what this skill really is and wonders if it's some kind of necromancy. He extends his hand toward the dead goblin, and the system tells him he can use shadow extraction on this target. But before using it, he will have to pick a command to activate the skill. At first, Suho thinks it's a bit of a hassle to come up with a command just to use the skill, and while he's mulling it over, Beru suggests commands should always be something direct. So with that in mind, Suho quickly tells the dead goblin to arise. Suho summoned 3 normal rank shadow goblins, but the shadow extraction didn't impress him. Beru explained that freshly extracted monsters were weaker and smaller than when they were alive. Suho noted that the extraction would only last for 1 day, which made Beru depressed as he believed the shadow extraction skill would prove valuable later. Suho reassured Beru and urged him to leave the dungeon, feeling hungry after not eating for 2 days. Beru reminded him that he could use the shadow dungeon key to exit any time, having already passed the quest. Suho readily left the dungeon. Back at the hospital, Suho ate to his heart's content. As he ate, Beru outlined their 3 key responsibilities. First, they needed to protect Earth from the monsters emerging from dungeons, which would naturally boost Suho's level and make Earth safer under his protection. Second, they had to find Lord Hai-In, prompting Suho to ask if they could locate his mother. Baru assured him that they would find the answer while battling monsters. Lastly, the most crucial task was restoring Baru's lost powers, as he despised weakness. Baru explained that as an ant with the ability to consume magic and intelligence, he could regain his strength by absorbing magic from various entities, including a young monarch like Suho. Understanding the gravity of these responsibilities, Suho resolved to enter the dungeon. However, there was a problem. The Hunter Association didn't allow unapproved hunters to enter dungeons, so Suho needed to assess his rank. Given his increased stats after awakening, he wondered what rank he would achieve. Upon testing, a lady informed him that his magic level was 46, making him an E rank awakened. Disappointed, Suho returned, feeling hopeless. Baru explained that Suho had focused on increasing his stats, not his magic level, and the system rank was based on magic level. Despite Baru's words, Suho remained disheartened, doubting how an E rank could save the world, especially since even the Hunter Strike team didn't select E and F rank hunters. However, Baru proposed a plan. The dungeons had specific duties for different grade ranks. The higher rank strike team focused on clearing the dungeon by fighting the monsters, while the collecting team wrapped up the dead bodies. At the very back was the mining team, which gathered resources inside the dungeons. E-rank hunters could apply for the collecting and mining teams. Baru's plan worked, and Suho reached a dungeon full of resources. While working, Suho met his instructor, IM, who was also an awakened E-rank. Suho was thankful for the help getting work inside the dungeon as a resource collector. IM remained silent but suddenly bowed and apologetically told Suho that when monsters broke out in the university classroom, he was the only awakened one who ran out of fear and couldn't help. Suho encouraged him, saying that the Hunter Association had instructed E-rank hunters to run away from monsters, so he had acted accordingly. Hearing this, Instructor IM shouted at Suho, doubting if he had mistaken Suho for someone else fighting a C-rank monster. He started to brag that it would be more shocking to see Suho fighting monsters and surviving. Suddenly, Baru popped out of Suho's shadow, scaring Instructor IM by speaking near his ear about how incredible Suho was. Instructor IM, having never seen such an entity, started to cry in fear. Suho asked Baru why he had come, to which Baru replied that Suho was still weak and needed assistance. Watching them talk, Instructor IM told Suho he was lucky to awaken the powers of a summoner, despite his low rank. Trying to avoid Baru, IM attempted to run away, but Suho jolted him for running once again from a monster, which IM took seriously and became sad. Though it was Suho's first time entering the dungeon, he was curious to see the striking team hunting monsters. Deep down in the dungeon, the dragon team had killed all the monsters and encountered lichens. One striking team member said that the monsters' bodies contained magic stones, so they must keep searching for valuables. Another found a narrow pathway no one had discovered in the dungeon and told the captain to investigate. 3 of them went inside. Although the place was ruined, there seemed to be no monsters, and even the hunters' tracking skills sensed no presence of a monstrous entity. They were confused about how the place got ruined without any monsters. They found a sword pierced into the floor, which looked like high-tier equipment, and all of them wanted to see it because it could be worth a lot. One guy reminded them of traps around high-value weapons, so they must be careful. A hunter named Kim Young didn't listen and pulled the sword, saying a skilled hunter in a C-rank tank could handle any traps. As he pulled the sword, he unknowingly awakened one of the monarchs of the Fangs. When the whole sword was out, it seemed there was no trap. As they approached him, he turned into a humanoid monster, yelling at them for coveting the sword of the Fang monarch, known as the King of Beasts among the 9 monarchs. Rakan ordered the killing of all invaders in the domain of the Fang's monarch and savagely slaughtered the 3 hunters who couldn't face him. Meanwhile, Instructor IM and the other resource collectors were surprised to see Suho summon 3 goblins for resource collection. Instructor IM wondered how Suho could summon 4 entities, including a talking ghost, when most could only summon 2. Suho also found it unusual that he could summon 3 goblins and noted the inconvenience of needing corpses for shadow extraction. He used goblin corpses in the shadow dungeon, where they worked tirelessly. He told Baru that the shadow extraction technique was beneficial. However, Baru dismissed the praise, emphasizing that their goal was to level up, not focus on extraction. Suho mentioned that the Hunter Association's rules required E-rank hunters to avoid entering dungeons alone. He believed there might be errors in the ranking system and planned to reassess once he gained more mana. He also reminded Baru about recovering his lost powers. Hearing this, Baru became excited, and Suho instructed him to devour mana crumbs. When Instructor IM noticed, Suho changed the tone, saying Baru wasn't helpful in mining and should scavenge the crumbs. As Baru tried to feed on a crumb, he sensed a strong monarch's presence. Suho speculated it might be his father, but Beru explained that his father was not the only monarch. Others possessed similar powers. Beru's powers would recover instantly if his father were nearby, but he couldn't identify the approaching beast. Suddenly they heard a striking sound. The laborers became alert, and some asked about the attacking squad. They were shocked to see lichens at the mining site. Everyone panicked and started running, but one person tried to stop the lichens and was slammed away. Suho faced the lichens, giving the laborers time to escape. He noticed their orange names, indicating a higher level like the D-rank mist burns he had fought before. He decided to fight them, but hoped for backup. Instructor IM stayed, and Suho asked him to help if the situation became dangerous. Suho instructed the goblins to protect IM and pulled goblin weapons from his inventory, surprising Instructor IM with his ability to summon weapons. Suho moved with lightning speed, effortlessly vanishing the monstrous creatures and slicing through the steel-fanged lichen like a ripe fruit. As Instructor IM looked on in awe, Suho's powerful presence left him speechless. Facing two lichens attacking simultaneously, Suho skillfully handled the situation. While one lichen clamped down on his weapon, Beru marveled at Suho's mastery of combat using shadow powers as he devoured the fallen monster. Suho reflected on his ability to use extraction and summoning without depleting his mana, realizing the potential to amass an army of the dead by increasing his mana capacity. Deep in thought, he swiftly dispatched one lichen by piercing its skull with his weapon, before swiftly dealing with the other. Then, without hesitation, he summoned them back to life. The remaining goblin looked on sadly, realizing that after Suho will summon another lichen after extraction, he would disappear forever. Instructor IM was astonished at how effectively an E-rank like Suho could control the monsters, but Suho confidently affirmed his status as an E-rank awakened individual. Suddenly, a quest notification appears, instructing Suho to kill an enemy seeking to kill him. Suho initially thinks he has defeated all the lichens, but then he spots a figure approaching them in an attacking team's suit. Instructor IM warns that they are not safe from the lichens, but Suho senses something about the approaching figure and pulls IM behind him. The figure suddenly strikes at IM, missing him but shattering his glasses. Had Suho not intervened, IM would have been annihilated. The ground shatters where the figure's sword lands, revealing its immense power. Suho decides to flee, perplexed by hunters turning into monsters. He notices the figure's red aura, indicating its formidable strength. Flashbacks of his father bravely battling such a monarch flood Suho's mind. He asks Beru if this monarch is like his father. Beru replies that while Rakan has a powerful aura, he is not on the same level as Suho's father. Nevertheless, fighting Rakan would be unwise, given Suho's current level. Despite this, Suho opens his inventory and selects a weapon. Beru is stunned at Suho's determination to fight. Suho explains that the system considers his safety before issuing quests. Thus, if he could defeat the monster, the system would give him the quest. Suho shows his resolve to fight and increase his rank, motivated by the desire to see his parents. With his extracted lichens by his side, Suho steps fearlessly into the domain of the fangs, determined to kill Rakan and grow stronger quickly. Beru is stunned as Suho faces off against the formidable monster, thinking Suho, despite his current weakness, embodies the shadow of a true monarch. He advises Suho that cutting off the monster's arm would sever its connection to the host. Once a mighty hunter, the beast has become even more formidable after infection. Suho initiates the attack, ordering his lichens to engage the monster. They manage to hold it off temporarily, and Suho is impressed by his ability to sustain his extractions as long as he has mana. While the lichens battle the monster, Beru asks if Suho is aware of the other powers of the Shadow Soldiers. Suho is surprised to learn they possess more abilities, but Beru explains that Suho's weak monarch mana prevents him from seeing them. The monster mocks Suho for wielding the Shadow Monarch's power, but Beru is enraged at the insult to his master. The beast is shocked to learn Suho is the descendant of the Shadow Monarch, the biggest rival of the Monarch of Fang. Seizing the moment, Suho throws a spear, which the monster easily breaks. Suho hurls multiple weapons using his authority, but the beast smashes them away. Suho then summons all the hunter's blades in the dungeon and attacks simultaneously. The monster dodges and grows more furious, breaking Suho's sword in a single blow. Realizing close combat is too dangerous, Suho avoids confrontation and keeps his distance, aiming to tire out the monster. The monster taunts Suho, calling him a coward hiding behind the Shadow Monarch's abilities. Suho understands the provocation, but sticks to his plan, dodging attacks and keeping his distance. In a brief moment of reflection, Suho recalls questioning Beru about his true abilities. Beru explained that the restrictions from his childhood were temporary, and that Suho should now consider himself as having regained his former talent. Baru revealed that those dreams about clearing the tower was a test to see if Suho could handle his talent. The enhancements to his body were temporary, but his experiences were valuable. Baru emphasized that Suho's fighting spirit and senses were his true strengths. Suho recalls the powers of his senses and desires a gauntlet. He devises a plan to reshape his extracted shadows into his desired form. Summoning them once more, he is met with the monster's taunts, declaring that no scheme has ever scarred him and warning Suho to give up or face death. As the lichens attack from all sides, the monster skillfully evades them and strikes Suho with his sword. However, Suho's steel-fanged lichen morphs to block the attack. This marks Suho's breakthrough. He can now reshape his extracted shadows, allowing him to form a gauntlet for close combat. He effectively counters the monster's strikes, dominating the fight. Impressed by Suho's ability to use shadow soldiers as weapons with increasing freedom, the monster acknowledges Suho's potential. With his aptitude for the Shadow Authority, Suho, though at the beginning stage, shows extraordinary skills. His increasing aura propels him to deliver powerful blows, eventually landing a crushing punch to the monster's belly. The beast collapses, creating a dust cloud, but rises again, now more enraged. Suho summons all his weapons and wields an axe as the monster, driven mad, attacks recklessly. The monster hits Suho in the back, but the steel lichen protects him. In a swift response, Suho unleashes a series of deadly strikes, ultimately defeating the monster and proving himself as a true prodigy. Standing aside from the core of monsters, Suho embarks on that. Though he got worried about the monster's rank, he never doubted himself to defeat him. Baru also tried to show that he believed in his master, but Suho hushed him. He feels better with his new shadow extraction ability. When he checks his reward, he is surprised to learn a new skill, a Storm Lash, and Rune Stone. It will enable him to strike multiple enemies in one strike. Suho will use the skill professionally, so he tried to test it. He looks for a sword to pursue the skill. The Fang Monarch is humiliated, even at the defeat of his host. The thought that he couldn't bear is that he could accept losing to the Shadow Monarch's descendant, Suho. However, the battle will persist until human greed will. Here, we come to know how Rakan hosts humans. The moment Suho tries to pick up his sword, his curse devours the whole body of the person grabbing it. But Suho picks it up. A blue aura dominates the red one. A system notification prompts that he has obtained an item, Fang of Rakan. Suho liked the sword as an excellent tool to test his skill. But the Fang Monarch is out of his mind because he, the inheritor of the Fang Monarch, couldn't take over him. Suho had the blessings of excellent spellcaster Candiaru, and with the longevity effect, he is immune to all status effects. Suho tests his Storm/Slash skill with the Fang of Rakan. It shatters stones even far away into pieces. Baru observes him and says that he is reacting differently from the moment he saw Shadow Extraction. The Shadow Authority is thousands of times more incredible than such skill. Listening to this, he feels sad. Meanwhile, Instructor IM becomes conscious but freaks out when he sees the core of strikers before him. Suho said explaining things would take a while, so he shouldn't freak out. Outside the dungeon, there's a lot of activity and noise. Suho, with a serious demeanor, has already rescued several people and is now heading back in to look for any remaining survivors. Instructor IM is puzzled by how vital Suho is, considering he's an E rank with summoning skills, which are usually considered insignificant. However, Suho's actions speak otherwise as he saves multiple workers and ventures back into the dungeon. Once inside, he encounters many wolf monsters and dispatches them with his Shadow Extract concealment ability, which helps him level up. He then stands atop the pile of defeated monsters, while Baru mentions that it's suitable for her experience to increase by killing more of them. Suho notices something strange. The power of his sword suddenly weakens. The sword reveals that it can only work with the descendant of the Shadow Monarch, making Suho realize the significance of the Fang of Rakan. The vengeful spirit of Rakan resides within the sword, and Baru comments on the dubious nature of being more assertive when dealing with someone weaker. The sword defends its ability, suggesting that one always goes after something more substantial in hunting. But the truth remains that Suho is weaker than the sword's host. Despite his efforts, he is defeated. Suho is surprised to hear the sword speak but proceeds into Rakan's domain. There, he finds the bodies of the strikers, and the sword explains that it has killed every intruder as part of its duty to protect the sanctuary of the Fang Monarch. The system notifies him that he can also use shadow extraction in the human corpse. Baru told him as long as it was a corpse, he could turn any of them into his soldier. Suho thinks of it as a great idea, but eventually gives up and carries them away. Upon inquiry by Baru, he told them that if they have to fight for him even after death, then it's punishing them. He asked Baru if the sanctuary they were in was of monarchs. Then he asked about his father killing that monarch if it's related to Itarims. Baru briefs him that Itarism is the current enemy of the monarch. There were 9 monarchs, including his liege, the great Sung Jinwoo, and Ashbourne's successor. He is the current shadow monarch and king of the dead. The Rakan, the monarch of fangs, and king of beasts. Quaratia, monarch of plagues and queen of insects. Tarnak is the monarch of the iron body and king of monstrous humanoids. Baran, monarch of white flames and king of demons. Ligia, monarch of the beginning and king of giants. Silid, aka Frost Monarch, monarch of frost and king of snowfolk. Yogamont, monarch of transfiguration and king of demonic specters. The Antares, monarch of destruction and king of dragons. The transcendent strength possessed by all 9 monarchs was beyond contemplation. Baru continues to tell him that when 8 of the monarchs invaded Earth, they all died at the hands of his lord. Suho was amazed to know his father killed them all. The sword also said that the Shadow Monarch is his lord's enemy who killed his master, the Fang Monarch. He dares Suho that if he had all of his strength intact, he couldn't wait to kill the descendant of the Shadow Monarch. Suho shares his viewpoint that his father killed the other monarch to protect Earth, and the Rakan is also trying to protect its place from the invaders. So both sides are right from their point of view. But the difference lies in the taking vengeance from the descendant. He further said that if Rakan must protect this place, it wouldn't be foolish to be hostile towards his father, whom the Fang Monarch couldn't defeat. But the sword doesn't seem to understand that. Suho comes straight to the point and proposes a deal to help him, so he will help him protect this place from the Itarims. The Shadow and the Fang fighting on the same battlefront do feel odd, but Suho proposes an excellent deal to him. Outside the dungeon, we see a group of people sitting with Instructor IM for the details of the incident happening at the dungeon. He starts to tell about what happened. He thought for a second that people would treat him better when they saw the results Suho received, even though he is an E rank. Therefore, this would be an excellent opportunity for him to repay his debt. That evening, an article got uploaded onto the internet, and an E rank hunter fearlessly ventured into a dungeon alone to save the higher rank strikers. There are more headlines about the many testimonies of whom he had saved by a hero residing within an E rank. One guy keenly observed the articles and planned to get more porters to cover more details. Black Tortoise Guild, in the second department, Lee Young-ho, feels Suho is an exciting candidate for his guild. He sent his profile of him to his workers, and they were even astonished by his news of clearing the dungeon all alone. He orders his workers to try to contact Suho immediately. After a while, Lee Young-ho asked if Hunter Sung Suho had replied. In his opinion, a beginner like him should have been very happy to receive an invitation from their big guild. But as it turned out, he had declined. Lee Young-ho had a look of shock on his face. He couldn't believe that an E-rank hunter could decline an invitation from a guild as large and powerful as theirs. He asked to double-check if it was a mistake. But no, it was true. Besides, it looked like Sung Suho wasn't planning to join at all. Lee Young-ho couldn't believe that the man who was doing the job of a hunter wasn't going to join a guild. Did he really think he was the S-rank elite? But according to his assistant, all was not lost. After all, clearing the dungeons alone wasn't just difficult, it was almost impossible. He was sure that after some time, he would come to them himself. In the meantime, Suho continued to reject endless offers from guilds. Once he returned from the dungeon, the messages didn't stop coming. In Beru's opinion, many people needed his strength. However, the reality was different. The guilds only offered Suho a job as a collector or a porter. The reason why he wasn't going to join a guild was because it would prevent him from advancing. Joining would mean slowing down his progress. In short, it was useless. Since he was finally done with all those annoying messages, Suho decided to have a conversation with Fang of Rakan. Back in the dungeon, he told Fang of Rakan that the Fang and Shadow aligned with each other. In Fang of Rakan's opinion, it sounded like some nonsense, and he was even surprised that Suho was talking about it so easily. However, there was still a possibility that they would become allies instead of enemies in the future. Fang of Rakan also had a condition. He wanted our hero to take him to another sanctuary of the Fang Monarch. Suho continued his conversation at home and asked Fang if he knew how to get there. He replied that when it came to the Fang Monarch's sanctuary, he could find out its location no matter how far away it was. Now he felt that the gate that led to the shrine had already disappeared. In his opinion, it was because of what people called the dungeon rupture. In simple terms, this place had become a field-type dungeon. That was the name of the dungeon where the abandoned gate had been breached, causing the monsters to break out. Now that everything was clear, Suho had no intention of delaying any longer. After sending his uncle a message asking him not to worry about him, he set off. After a while, he arrived at the protected area. After receiving confirmation from Fang of Rakan that this was indeed the right place, Suho noticed a sign. It said that only members of the Hyena Guild were allowed to enter. It looked like this place was now run by the Hunters Guild. This was a problem, because trespassing on private property was punishable by law. It was also the property of the Hyena Guild itself, which was mostly made up of criminals. Beru immediately disliked the idea. In his opinion, they shouldn't listen to Fang of Rakan, and should rather focus on leveling up. However, Suho seemed to think otherwise. When asked by Beru about what he was up to, our boy replied with anticipation in his voice that he was preparing to enter there. Even the Hyenas Guild wasn't a problem. After all, if they didn't have proof, they would never know who the culprit was. Beru couldn't help but notice that Suho was very reminiscent of his father with his reckless actions. After successfully sneaking into the territory, Suho wondered if the field-type dungeon was always so foggy. Nanny Beru began to explain that the fog was the magical power of outer space. It breaks through dimensional wall, causing ruptures in the worlds. This fog is the reason the sacred ground Fang of Rakan was on broke through the dimension and got linked to Earth. It was as if the otherworldly beings were about to send their army to Earth through a huge hole in the dimension. After all, the more magical power involved, the more it affects movement in space. Simply put, for someone strong to appear, Suho needed to wait. This was time he did not intend to waste. He intended to fully spend the time waiting to level up. Thanks to the local monsters, he had everything he needed to do so. His opponents were Daggerclaw Vriga and Black Shadow Rajan. Their names were orange-colored, which meant Suho would be able to have some fun. In addition, it looked like Fang of Rakan had no intention of staying on the sidelines and wanted to show his strength. To Suho, his words sounded promising. However, he didn't intend to use sword as his main weapon, as he had already figured out how he would fight. And to begin with, Suho planned to use the basic attacks used in the tutorials. Then he would accelerate those attacks with the ruler's power ability. Next, Suho used different weapons to be unpredictable. And finally, the Storm Slash skill left monsters no chance at all. But even that wasn't all. Get more equipment using shadow extraction. That was his new and strongest way of fighting. Beru couldn't find the words to express his admiration for our boy. Fang of Rakan remained silent, but he had something to think about. He had just been able to see the power that Suho had managed to inherit from the Shadow Monarch. The more opponents he had, and the longer the battle dragged on, the stronger he became as he picked up the Fallen. In a battle like this, no one had a chance of defeating him. After a while, Suho was facing his new undead army. Thanks to his level up, his intelligence level had also risen. Now the number of summoned creatures had increased to 5. But according to Beru, this was still negligible compared to the old monarch. After a while, Suho managed to get to the right place. At the place where the gate leading to the sanctuary should have been, there was a base. Even at this late hour, there were many people there. Suho thought it was strange, because the best time to fight monsters was during the day. Suddenly, a car came to the base and everything became clear. Our hero was shocked by what he saw. Bound and battered people started coming out of the car, who had clearly not been brought here voluntarily. The members of the Hyenas Guild were really scum. Suho found it hard to believe that such terrible things could still happen in the civilized world. Realizing how this scene might make our hero feel, Beru advised him not to get into a fight. After all, if they were caught trespassing on private property, his status as a hunter would be in danger. But as it turned out, Suho no longer heard him. He rushed towards the bandits without a second thought. Beru could understand his feelings. Suho's father was a police officer, and his grandfather was a legendary firefighter who had saved hundreds of lives. Suho had grown up under their influence since childhood, and now he just couldn't stay away when he saw injustice. Sensing something, the man turned around to check it out. And the first thing he saw was our boy's leg. It was time for justice to be served. His blatant act first, think later approach managed to stop the Hyena Guild member from approaching the bound lady with ill intentions. Sung Suho's feet were planted deeply into the face of the perv, leaving a shoe print on the bastard's cheek. Beru, the sword, and the other supporting cast were left hiding in the foliage while the young monarch wreaked havoc. The bastards of the Hyena Guild were caught off guard. They were not expecting any intrusion into their operation, and now there's a young man going sicko mode on them. Suho's initial strike was supremely effective. The momentum of his fist was top-notch, knocking the perv down to the ground, eating dirt and gravel. The young monarch slowly turned his head to assess the situation. His gaze was as cold as ice. Then came the realization that he had just blown his cover, effectively leaving himself exposed in the middle of a privately owned territory controlled by brutal criminals. His act first, think later approach only works if you have the power to back it up. These hyena bastards could easily turn the story against him, as illegal trespass on another guild's territory is a massive crime. Thankfully, he was quick enough to come up with a simple answer that would get him out of hot water against the law and retaliation. Manipulating some of his shadows, he transformed them into a mask that would effectively hide his identity. With his identity protected, Suho questioned the Hyena Guild for their blatant practice of kidnapping and endangering people. But the hyena punks didn't budge against his questioning. They returned the question instead. As if it wasn't enough to trespass, this masked man was openly attacking them too. One of the officers ordered his men to attack the intruder, to destroy and tear him limb from limb using blade and magic. With Suho's inherent skill and growing experience, he had no trouble evading the rough technique of a hoodlum. Moreover, he did his research against this hyena guild. Their average member rank is only D rank. Seeing that these people are bottom dwellers, Suho decided to tone his strength down to prevent any accidental deaths. But even with his suppressed level of strength, he had enough power to blast an enemy away with a well-timed counter. The impact was so forceful that it also took the man along the first victim's path. It was a 2-for-1 deal. Suho did not stop there. He took to the air to dropkick 2 bastards up front. This absolutely mad lad performed a split in midair, taking out 2 punks at once. Beru watched from the sidelines, impressed with how well the young monarch was moving. He could see that Suho had grown stronger. Those that humans call D-rank awakeners can no longer cause him any trouble. Seeing this incredible pace of improvement deeply moved the shadow ant. Suho, on the other hand, felt that dispatching these enemies came a little too easily. At level 16, he primarily focused all his attribute points on strength while keeping the other ones evenly balanced. After dealing with the criminals in this crooked hyena guild, Suho promptly tied them up together. It was a little villain sleepover. As Suho dusted his hands from all the manual bondage work, Beru praised his clean execution. The kidnapped survivors also came up to Suho to thank him for setting them free from the guild's clutches. When asked if he was a hunter from the Hunter Association, he gave them a roundabout answer. He then told the survivors to escape to a safe place while he cleaned up the area. Luckily, they still had the vehicle used to send them inside the private compound. Suho wondered just why the Hyena Guild was kidnapping folks. Suddenly, the Sword started reacting with their primary goal, which is why they snuck into this place in the first place. They could feel it concealed within the lawless facility of the Hyena Guild. After walking around for a moment, the party reached a structure that looked like a massive warehouse from the outside. Upon seeing what was inside, Suho's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. Inside were signs of horrific practices. It looked like a kennel or an inhumane prison, something straight out of a nightmare scenario. Looking to the side, there were remnants of medical paraphernalia. It looked a lot like they were imprisoning people in here and doing God knows what to them. The empty cages with loose chains showed the grim experiences of the people who were held here before. In the midst of all the bad vibes, Beru started sensing a vague energy that was pretty thin but familiar nonetheless. This feeling led them to a cage where a whimpering furry animal was cowering in fear. The poor guy was full of apparent signs of experimentation and unethical medical procedures. Suho looked at the imprisoned animal and became even more confused as to what the Hyena Guild was trying to do. The Sword interjected, correcting Suho that what was in front of them was not a dog. That young wolf behind bars was a descendant of the King of Beasts, the Fang Monarch. It turns out that after being defeated by the Shadow Monarch in war, the King of Beasts assigned a guard to escort his remaining descendants to safety. The king believed that another Fang Monarch would emerge from his bloodline one day. If the loyal Sword was being honest, they weren't even hoping for the birth of another Fang Monarch. They just wished for the descendants of their king to live on. Suho gently carried the puppy away from the enclosure. Beru could sense the vague energy of the Fang Monarch on the little pup. Its vitality had declined so much that if left alone, death would come. Whatever the young monarch wanted to do, Beru would roll with it. The next step was entirely up to Suho. Before they could come up with an answer, a heavy presence of oppression coated the atmosphere. The smell of bloodlust entered the warehouse as the silhouette of a beast headed inside. A gruff and playful voice noted the missing guards in the vicinity. He was expecting a group of intruders, but the culprit was just one guy. Suho hurriedly summoned his mask back up. But upon catching a glimpse of the surprise guest, his blood ran cold. The owner of the gruff voice speaking in perfect human tongue wasn't a human. It was a literal hyena monster. This beast scorned the Hyena Guild for being so useless, as expected of humans. The Sword recognized this guy as Brocky. They were somehow connected back in the day. This lunatic was supposed to be the guard assigned to protect the descendants of the Fang Monarch. Brocky also recognized Rakan's fang in blade form. Rakan's fang floated forward. He interrogated Brocky for behaving like a lunatic when he was supposed to be the protector of the king's bloodline. Just what was the guardian doing for the last puppy to end up in such a miserable state of pain and neglect? Brocky seemed offended by the questioning of his job, and you don't want to see Brocky offended. Within a fraction of a second, he closed the distance between him and Suho. The beast even extended its sharp claws to touch and inspect the human just to intimidate. Brocky claimed that Suho was touching a pup that belonged to him. Overwhelmed by the tension and the monster's speed, Suho tried to lock in. The savage hyena was charging in again. This time he looked a lot more unhinged. Blocking the incoming attack might not be so simple. Still, with a massive speed disadvantage, Suho's reflexes were only fast enough to get a hastily put-together guard block. The initial contact did not hit any vital parts, but the momentum sent him flying into concrete walls, crumbling any unfortunate structures on the way into dust. His crash was so severe and apparent that Baru started panicking for the young monarch's well-being. Zooming out of the perimeter, you could see that a single attack from that hyena produced a wreck of Avengers-level destruction. Baru managed to find the young monarch under the rubble, and he was oddly fine. He was just a little shaken by the attack that hurt the most out of all the times he's been hit recently. He says that, but his head was bleeding quite heavily. He could hear some ringing inside his head too. Sustaining heavy damage was rewarded by the system, though. It leveled up his endurance skill, increasing physical resistance from 20% to 40%. Baru shared that he's been sensing vague remnants of familiar energy in the area since earlier. Now he's realizing that he's picking up the signs of Iterim in this compound. More specifically, in that beast called Braki. Hearing that the mysterious Iterim is somehow involved, this just became personal for Suho. Braki was already in the process of retrieving the dying pup, still with the creepy look on his ugly face. Rakan's Fang tried to make sense of what Braki was doing, but the beast really was just batshit crazy. Then Braki explained that there's a reason why he's been able to maintain his high level of strength after losing his sanctuary. He simply chose to shift his perspective that life is all about the survival of the fittest. The fate of the weak is up to the whims of the strong. That's why it's natural for the weak puppies to sustain the strong. This brat they're calling the descendant of the Fang monarch was nothing but the best source of nutrition around for someone like Braki. If presented with the tastiest dish imaginable, you would eat it too. In Braki's case, he's been regularly consuming the puppy's blood, extracting the Fang monarch's essence through the bloodlines. Hearing this treasonous monster explain his crimes made Rakan's Fang furious, wanting to kill Braki if it was the last thing he'd do. But the hyena just laughed at his outrage. Braki asserted that Rakan died simply due to the fact that he was weak. As for himself, he has survived for so long because he's one of the strongest people. Just as he was proclaiming to be the only fitting candidate to be the next Fang monarch, a sneak attack loosened his grip on the puppy. Braki reacted fast. His reflexes were out of this world, his bloodlust even more so. But Baru was even faster in retrieving the weak wolf pup. He even snickered at the enemy's pathetic speed. After securing the pup, Baru got out of there in one quick movement. Suho then called the Fang of Rakan to his hand as he faced the real boss of the hyena guild. His synchronicity with the blade was a sight to behold. The hostage was safe. It was time to go all out. It's a good thing that the Fang was pissed to death with Braki. They could use that anger to settle some business with the beast. With a common enemy, they could finally show the world the first alliance between Shadow and Fang. Iterim better pay attention. This Braki fellow represented Suho's first clue regarding the mystery of his father. This battle-tested savage beast trusted by the Fang monarch wouldn't give up that clue so easily, for sure. As Braki's anger flared up with a murderous scream, one of his eyes lit up with a golden sigil. At the same time, Suho received the emergency quest to hunt the hyena. He must take down Braki and reach safety. Baru, stuck babysitting on the sidelines, was almost driven to tears as he couldn't do much but watch the fight from a safe distance to protect the pup. Speaking of the pup, all the chaotic sounds of fighting must have woken him up. Even the simple process of slowly opening his eyes made the puppy struggle. The sight he saw was the young monarch's back standing proud against Braki. Shadow and Fang casually dusted the damage sustained earlier, standing in front of the beast for the actual fight. Suho fixed his eyes on the hyena. He even tied a bandana on his forehead to look dope as hell. At least now it's clear where the hyena guild got their name, those uncreative bastards. But how did a monster make a guild that kidnaps people? Could it have something to do with Iterim? As Braki exited the warehouse, he saw the hyena guild members tied up neatly. They were respectfully pleading for Mr. Braki to set them free, the fear apparent in their voices. The goon up front warned Braki that Suho was not an average guy, and that they needed to work together against this unknown enemy. Hearing this imminent increase in troublesome enemies, Suho was prepared to charge in and stop that team from happening. He drew his blade fast, but the beast opened its jaw and showed its fangs even faster. Its target wasn't the young monarch, but his own guild members. In one swift motion of a brutal bite, Braki made the heads of his men lunch in one chomp. Blood spurted all over the place as the disembodied heads moved to the monster's stomach. Suho was flabbergasted, stunned even. He was not expecting to see such a severe case of friendly fire. Braki explained that he did not need a bunch of humans telling him that he needed help. Those who don't know their place are immediately executed. That's his law. Seeing just how ruthless this monster was, Suho knew that such evil could not be left to roam the world free. Braki must answer his sins under the blade. Unfortunately, Suho's blade and the raw power behind it were not quite enough to pierce through the monstrous hyena's hands. He gritted his teeth and drove the pressure down even harder, but it did not show any signs of budging. He was angry, extremely so. This bastard viewed humans like filth to the point of daring to kill multiple people without batting an eye. Brocky just repeated that the right to live as a weakling is determined by those who hold power. With this reasoning, he could practically do whatever he wanted. He's so deep in his delusion that he would take everything he wanted. With one claw strike, he sent Suho flying to the steel containers once again. This time, the young monarch was prepared to bounce back after just a few moments. Against an enemy as experienced as Brocky, letting his guard down for even just a moment could spell life or death. Thankfully, he was able to dodge the follow-up bite that went on to make a crater on the ground. Brocky was so fast that it almost felt like fighting two enemies at once. 1 minute he was on your right, the next he was already targeting your left. Impressively, Suho was managing the head-to-head battle of pure animalistic instincts quite well. Brocky was not a typical opponent, though. Every move he made had the profound weight of destruction. While executing the complex moves of a hungry beast, he looked like he was making a mockery of his prey, with that insulting grimace permanently etched on his face. Then came the claw attack so powerful that it sliced the air and every structure that happened to be on the way. Brocky noticed that his over-the-top attack did not quite land on the target, though. He tried to look around and regain clarity, but the young monarch had already enacted his plan to go from the monster's blind spot to the sky. From up above, he utilized his downward force to increase the velocity of the storm slash, pushing it to the limit to wound the troublesome hyena. Sure, he managed to make the beast bleed in multiple places, but the cuts were too shallow, failing to deal significant damage. Brocky laughed, teasing the Fang of Raycon for being such a disappointingly dull relic of the Fang monarch. Carelessly running his mouth without paying attention to the enemy opened Brocky to a painful stab in the back. Suho pretty much turned the tables completely at this point, but he was not finished yet. While lodged deep in the monster's flesh, he ordered the Fang of Raycon to spin and carve a way out of the monster's body. The Fang spun out, still thinking why the loyal Brocky would change so drastically like this. This crazed dog, filled with hate and greed, used to respect and pledge his allegiance to Lord Raycon. What made him transform into something so unsightly is still a mystery. If you directly asked Brocky, he would answer that he used to respect Raycon. But there's a particular group of entities that made his perception change. They're known by their golden sigil. That same golden sigil was etched into Brocky's left eye. With his principles being put into question, the monster's brain must have been plunged into turmoil, leading to an even more aggressive series of attacks. He swiped his claws with full motion, seemingly trying to shut down anyone in his path. Brocky's tone eventually devolved into an even crazier cadence. He claimed that he never respected the king of beasts. He merely had no choice but to yield in front of Raycon's strength. But now that he's awake, he won't go back to the life of a weakling, forced to kneel to higher powers. Demonstrating his resolve, Brocky broke Raycon's fang by force, shattering most of its blade into 1,000 little pieces. Suho made the grave mistake of trying to move towards a fallen comrade while the enemy was still in the vicinity. Brocky made him pay for this blunder. Fighting something as brutal as the hyena, Suho couldn't afford to worry about others. He should just focus on his own survival. The hyena's punch was a one-way ticket to untold agony. The damage made it feel like his bones were getting crushed. Any ordinary guy would have passed out and given in to the pain. But when Suho thought of his dad fighting literal gods by himself, he couldn't help but feel pumped. While Sung Jinwoo was busy with the bigger picture, his son couldn't fall into the hands of an insignificant monster. Suho called the power of shadows to coat his fists, bending the impressive power into the form of a gauntlet. A punch with this glove, he nearly rocked the hyena away by sheer force. Suho knew that this was one of those moments when he had to stand tall. Beru continued watching with the tense fear of the young monarch falling in battle, but it looked like he was keeping up with Brocky's intensity. To the side, Raycon's fang now looked like a sad piece of scrap equipment discarded on the ground. From the broken blade, the power of the Fang monarch started seeping away. Perhaps this was the end of the once illustrious family. The survival of the successor and the future of the Fang. Are they really leaving this all in the hands of Sung Suho? The Fang refused to go down so pathetically. He wanted to fight. He then saw the last descendant of the Fang monarch, a small puppy with horrific wounds, trying to stand up on his own. This was the successor of Lord Raycon. The blood of a monarch was not letting this proud beast go down without a fight. The sword finally realized what needed to be done all along. On the main field, Suho was still slugging it out with the hyena monster. He was at a disadvantage when it came to size, power, and everything else. But having his shadow armament was keeping him in contention. The sword and the descendant watched as a single human fought for their sakes. They couldn't help but feel inspired by Suho's fighting spirit. Rakan's Fang could now remember the last helpful thing he could do in such a poor and dying condition. He could just give his remaining power to the bloodline's successor, healing its past injuries and strengthening its small frame. The heir took in the power of Rakan's will smoothly, growing in size at an unreal pace. Back in the field, Brocky was still darting all around the place. He was equally accurate and unpredictable. Suho, even with his rapidly improving battle sense, could not come up with a better answer than blocking. After being depleted of his energy from the non-stop exchanges, Suho could barely keep his head upright from exhaustion. He felt the frustration of weakness seeping into his bones. With his remaining 21 HP, he would undoubtedly die if Brocky even grazed him with another heavy-duty attack. But the young monarch still managed to stand up, raising his fists to square up. He thought he was stronger than this. Brocky increased the spiritual pressure, praising Suho for being better than a regular human pest. But the time for playing was done, and Brocky wanted blood. Lunging in with his devious grin, his fangs aimed at Suho's head. Still reeling from his injuries that brought his HP to kill range, Suho couldn't possibly evade or block the incoming sharp attack. As he was cursing his luck, another entity literally jumped into the fray. It looked like a wolf wrapped with a golden aura. It had jaws and fangs strong enough to pierce through Brocky's tough fur and skin, stopping the animal's attack. Suho was supposed to go down miserably, but this unknown beast just came in, clutched to save him at the last minute. Brocky lifted his head, the golden sigil in his eye glowing brighter at the sight of the wolf. That bite wound looked nasty. Pools of dark blood flowing out of multiple wounds made it quite painful for the crazy hyena. After inflicting a troublesome injury on Brocky, the golden wolf with a mark on its forehead landed beside Suho. The look of rage in the wolf's eyes when it looks at the hyena is thick and bloody. Suho's system informed him that the successor of the Fang had shown respect for his fighting spirit. As a result, the successor was now formally requesting to be a part of his party. This means that Baby Wolf somehow turned into a full-grown beast while he was fighting against Brocky. The direct descendant of the Fang monarch wanted to form an alliance with him. Brocky was surprised that Rakan's heir was able to absorb mana from Rakan's Fang. Suho was also surprised by the sword's action and his sacrifice. He sacrificed himself to save the heir and give him strength in battle. Rakan's heir was still waiting to see what Suho would decide and whether he would accept him as an ally. But there was no reason for him to worry. Our hero had planned to work together with Fang from the very beginning, so there was no difference. Suho accepted the offer and pressed the yes button. Now he was successfully recruited successor of the Fang as his ally. Suddenly things didn't go according to plan and Suho's mind was flooded with memories. They belonged to the heir of Rakan. It was the first days after they lost the war to the Shadow Monarch. Then he had been left alone with Brocky, who had not yet become crazy. That Brocky believed that in the end, this world was about survival of the fittest, and they as those who defeat will lose much. But for the prosperity of the Fang, Rakan's heir must become stronger. Brocky protected and cared for the little wolf as best he could, until one day when everything changed abruptly. The little wolf was beaten and scared to death. They came, the Ataram messengers. Brocky tried to protect Rakan's heir, but was defeated and forced to kneel. Defeated and humiliated, he asked only one question. Why hadn't they finished him off yet? The main figure among all these figures was the child, and it was because Brocky seemed to be useful to him that he was still alive. This strange child chose him, and the woman brought the glowing stone to his eyes. As soon as the stone touched his eye, Brocky experienced indescribable pain, and his scream filled the cave. The little wolf wanted to help him, but there was nothing he could do. Now the hyena Brocky had new masters, and they gave him a new mission. From then on, he had to capture humans alive and bring them to his new masters. The thing that the child planted in Brocky's brain would increase his power and help him accomplish his mission. Though the ultimate effect of this power was up to the user, he was curious to see the result. Rakan's heir wept at the sight of the torment his protector had to endure. But even he realized that Brocky was no longer the same as before. The power given by the child twisted Brocky's desires, and he became a power-hungry, bloodthirsty monster. He remained that way until he met Suho. Coming to his senses after the flashback, our hero realized that he had seen the memories of Fang's heir. He was most interested in the bastards who had planted something in Brocky's eye. Perhaps they are the ones who are connected to Itarim, and are carrying out his dirty plans in this world. Then it appears that Fang's heir is not trying to take revenge on Brocky, but to save his friend who has gone mad. If Brocky's mission is so closely tied to these bastards' plans, then Suho must defeat him right here and now to put an end to it all. There was only one small problem. Suho didn't have the power to do that right now. Luckily, there was a notification from the system about a new quest, thanks to the recruitment of the ally. The quest was called Monarch's Heirs, and to complete it, our hero needed to find all 8 heirs of the monarchs and recruit them as allies. As a bonus, thanks to the alliance with the Fang heir, Suho and the little wolf gained bond skill. Their combined power was simply explosive, and literally so. Brocky was blinded. Baru, too, was barely holding on, and couldn't believe that the young monarch was experiencing something completely different from what the old monarch had faced. Brocky wasn't sure what it really was either, but he wasn't going to just stand by and let Suho do what he was going to do. With all his might, he lunged forward, and he put all the power he had into that punch. The blow hit its target, and the shockwave kicked up all the dust in the neighborhood. There was silence, and the dust began to dissipate. Suho was more alive than ever, and now easily held the distraught hyena by the arm. Despite Brocky's attempts, the bond skill was successfully applied. When combining the power with Fang's heir, Suho became much stronger. Thanks to this bond skill, our hero gained the power of the beast. Using this skill consumed 1 unit of mana every second. This skill can be combined with the skill successor of the Fang to become even stronger and get a sense of the beast. Brocky was surprised that the successor was consumed, but was not going to retreat. However, his chance to win was already gone. Suho easily dodged all of his attacks. He felt his body light and felt that his senses had become sharper. This allowed him to dodge with the slightest movements, and to clearly sense the moment when he could deliver one precise, devastating blow. The blow was so powerful that Brocky was lost in what was happening. He simply couldn't believe that it was the same kid as before. However, even so, with the power bestowed by those strange figures, he was sure he couldn't lose. If he lost, he would be deprived of everything. Fueled by rage, he rushed forward again, but Suho easily blocked his blow. Even Baru was surprised that the young monarch's mana had increased so quickly. Brocky didn't care about any of that. He didn't know what schemes our hero was cooking up, but he couldn't afford to lose to the human. He was sure that in the end, the difference in strength was determined by the difference in species. So he felt despair at the weakness of his opponent's flesh. Their counterblows met, and the force from the impact was incredible. But in the end, Brocky was wrong. His flesh and fist was weaker and was thrown aside, whereas Suho remained steadfast and even gained a new skill, martial arts. This is a passive skill that does not consume mana and allows the awakened to become more skilled at martial arts. Also, the damage dealt by bare hands is increased by 33%. Beru was furious that some pathetic dog dared to talk about species differences in front of the young monarch. There is no species higher than a shadow monarch who is a top apex predator. Brocky was shocked to hear this. It meant that this child was the son of the shadow monarch he hated so much and wanted revenge. But that was not destined to happen. Suho's foot strike had sealed him so deeply into the ground that all thoughts of revenge were gone. The ground around him could not withstand the impact either. Finally, silence fell over the forest. Suho deactivated the bond skill, returning to his normal appearance. Fang's heir immediately separated from him. Even the dying Brocky was captivated by his obsession to become stronger, and repeated it over and over again. He had to become stronger. Rakan's heir approached him and only whimpered softly. Brocky was dying, and it only a couple of seconds before he died that the stone planted in his eye began to dissipate, and he finally remembered. He remembered the reason he wanted to get stronger so badly, all to protect Rakan's heir, and now he was angry at himself for not being able to do so. With a parting howl, the little wolf gave his old friend a goodbye, and Suho got the notification that the hyena Brocky had been defeated, thanks to which he raised the level twice. And the rest of the story you will see very soon. The main thing, do not forget to put a like below the video and subscribe to the channel. With Brocky the hyena defeated, lying lifeless on the floor, the Fang's heir cautiously approached the corpse of his guardian. Sung Suho and Baru watched quietly from afar as the young pup mourned for Brocky. The shadow praised the young monarch for surpassing his limits and dealing with the vicious problem at hand. Baru said that he had felt Ataram's energy from the hyena earlier. Coincidentally, Suho was able to take a quick look at the early memories of the Fang's heir after they fused together. He saw what looked like hunters who entered the dungeon that Brocky was guarding and put something inside the beast's eye. Those hunters could be linked to the big picture, but their objective for attacking Brocky in the first place was still unclear. Beru reckoned that those hunters weren't official members of Ataram, as the outer gods wouldn't do the dirty work themselves. They tend to use apostles to mess with the world's causality, but the hunters were undoubtedly related to the invasion. They may be the apostles planted on Earth. It would be great if they had more information, as losing the trail of Itarim at this dead end would not be ideal. Beru had a way of getting some more info out of this situation though. Since Brocky had memories of those apostles, the shadow ant could devour the hyena's corpse and parse through his memories. He'd also recover some mana in the process. That's killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Suho didn't know that Beru's devour had such an effect, but that would definitely be useful for information gathering. He turned back to the Fang's heir. He saw the mixture of grief and anger in the young pup's eyes. The young man sat beside the young pup and formally extended an invitation to come along with him to a place they could both benefit from. The Fang's heir seemed flighty and distrusting. He was not a stranger to betrayals after all. But the young man's words and smile beckoned trust. The pup accepted the invitation by showing his affection and playfully licked Suho's face. That place Suho was talking about was the place only accessible through his special key. He opened the portal to the domain of shadows and left Baru to do his job and take care of Brocky's remains. The ant still could not get used to the young monarch's kindness and trust. Suho and the Fang's heir entered the bleak domain, a ruined cityscape surrounded by unnaturally sharp earthen formations. Baru quickly dealt with his assignment and tagged along. He was curious why the young monarch would come to the dungeon after such an intense fight instead of going home. Suho reckoned that this place would be the perfect spot for the Fang's heir to live. Of course, no sane person would willingly stay and live in the shadow dungeon. But the young pup had lost his guardian, and his sanctuary was gone. But now that he had allied with Suho, he'd be taken care of. Wagging his tail, the Fang's heir turned to Suho and asked the young man to give him a name. Since his fur was as gray as can be, Suho thought that gray would be a fitting name. Baru could not help but feel like Suho's naming sense was too similar to his dad, Sung Jinwoo. Gray seemed to like his new name. He had fully accepted Suho as a teammate with trust and respect. The young monarch partitioned a decent portion of the shadow dungeon and designated the forested area as the Fang's territory to use as Gray sees fit. He turned to Baru to ask what the descendant of the Fang monarch would eat. Since the Fang's bloodline runs in Gray's veins, he could practically eat any living organism or monster. That should be easy to supply. Feeding the wolf pup should not be too hard. Since there were still a lot of monsters Suho hadn't gotten rid of yet in the area, Gray could help do some cleaning up in his new territory. As soon as the Fang's heir picked up the scent of the monsters in the area, his mouth watered at the thought of goblin meat. The first goblin he encountered suffered a terrible fate, bitten through the neck with its head chopped off cleanly. Gray seemed to be doing fine on his own, even against a basic goblin party, so Suho could just chill on top of the trees to watch the slaughter. This gave him time to sort out the things he obtained from the fight with the hyena. His quest rewards included 5 additional ability points and the title of Wolf Slaughterer. With this new title, his overall stats would increase by a whopping 40% when fighting against beast-type monsters. The young man scratched his head. He obtained the title of Wolf Slaughterer when Brocky was a hyena. The system must be drunk or something. There was also the matter of the new quest called the Monarch's Heirs. The system basically asked him to find the other heirs of the deceased monarchs and add them to the team. Even Sung Jinwoo did not receive anything like this. Baru heard that the level-up system granted to Suho was tailored and made for the young monarch. It had been revised to remove the ill intentions of the original system. Back then, the system's objective was to forcefully develop the human known as Sung Jinwoo. It was made by the architect to mold the perfect vessel for the Shadow Monarch. Sung Jinwoo's soul was supposed to be destroyed once that objective was achieved. But he was built different, and he managed to go against the system itself. He defied logic and ultimately became the Shadow Monarch himself. Suho's current system doesn't necessarily aim to create a new Shadow Monarch, as there could only be one in this universe. His system was built to adapt to the direction of his personal advancement, acting as a guide. If any new functions or quests appear, then they must have popped up to aid his growth. It would be up to Suho to identify what his system's endgame would look like. Opening the status window, he had finally reached level 16 with some decent stat spread and an arsenal of skills to back it up. After hearing Baru's take on his system, it finally made sense why his class was still indicated as none. Compared to the time when he was chased around by the vicious Mistborns at level 1, his stats and skill selection had already improved by leaps and bounds. However, this was not nearly enough. Looking at his fight against Brocky, if it weren't for Gray and the bond skill that bailed him out, he would have been torn to shreds by the hyena. If the quests given by the system were in line with his goals, then clearing them would undoubtedly lead him to find his parents eventually. Jumping back down to the ground, Suho asked Baru how the analysis of Brocky's memories went. Unfortunately, the ant did not find anything related to the Ataram apostles that brainwashed Brocky. But that does not mean that he did not find any clue. He saw some memories of the humans who created the Hyena Guild for Brocky. Visions of them kidnapping humans for some reason. Baru managed to dig up the name of another guild connected to this sprawling conspiracy. The Grim Reaper Guild. If they could dig into this guild's dealings, they could find out more about Itarim's activities. In the Grim Reaper Guild's skyscraper headquarters, a phone rang, and a man sitting in a massive corner office answered. On the other end of the line was a man named Im-Tegyu, who was out in Southeast Asia helping with a high-profile raid. But Im-Tegyu was more concerned about the news of the Hyena Guild's criminal activities that were directly connected to their guild. Lee Min-sung tried to change the topic, but Tegyu refused to drop the subject. Tegyu found out that Min-sung had been doing some kind of commission with the criminals in the Hyena Guild, a connection that the association would inevitably uncover in the investigation. Min-sung argued that he could just mobilize their army of lawyers and insulate the Grim Reaper Guild from the association's queries. Even so, Taegyu warned the arrogant Minsung not to be overconfident. They might be able to skirt around the law, but the association's chairman is a different story. It would be up to Minsung to clean up the mess before Taegyu comes back to Korea. As soon as the call ended, Lee Minsung erupted in anger at how bossy Taegyu had become. That guy used to be just his driver, but he had since changed after awakening as an S-rank talent. With his superhuman strength and annoyance, Minsung smashed his office desk into smithereens. Even with the information he got from the survivors of the incident, the only info he had regarding the man who defeated Brocky and the Hyena Guild was that it was a young hunter who wore a black mask. Minsung does not have the time to deal with a problem he has no information on. Right now, Grim Reaper Guild's vice CEO, A-rank hunter, Lee Minsung, would rather focus on his business centered around a little sphere of power. They called this a hunter awakening stimulant, a drug named Stardust. If this venture went well, Minsung believed that no one would be able to look down on him anymore. Gray continued to tear through the helpless goblins using his claws and fangs, making a bloody mess of the monsters. As he gained more experience, his fighting style continued to develop beautifully. Beru urged the young pup to grow stronger so he could protect Suho. The ant even assigned Gray his own nickname, Growl. Suho was just glad the young wolf was adapting faster than he thought. Suddenly, the young man was surprised to see a system prompt notifying him that he would get 50% of EXP from Gray's kills. He turned to Beru, wondering if this EXP share feature was also supposed to be included in the original system. The Shadow Ant wasn't sure either, but it was similar to Sung Jinwoo getting EXP when his shadow soldiers hunted. It was more like an in-game party system. Although it was only 50%, it was basically free automatic level-ups. In that case, Gray should hunt even more monsters to farm more EXP. Hearing that made the young wolf shiver. Suho was suddenly alerted by another status window. After killing a certain number of Shadow Dungeon monsters, a quest requirement had been fulfilled. The daily cleanup quest has arrived. Within the day, he would need to kill 100 goblins, 10 goblin commanders, and 1 goblin centurion. True to its name, this was your run-of-the-mill cleanup quest. When there are quests, there are rewards to be harvested. With the daily tag, it must mean he could repeatedly grind this one out every day. The system is basically pushing Suho to take over the Shadow Dungeon permanently. Killing this many goblins should not be a problem, but the issue was finding 100 goblins in such a massive area. Fortunately, he had just the thing to solve that problem, chilling in his inventory. It was the E-rank horn flute that goblin centurions used to summon subordinates. Luckily, he got this equipment drop back in his first Shadow Dungeon run. Without hesitation, Suho blew on the horn as hard as he could to summon the goblins in the vicinity. It did not take too long for the hordes of green critters to march in the party's direction. Seeing a human, a shadow ant, and a wolf in their homeland, the monsters charged forward with murderous intent. The existence of the horn flute was a massive time saver. They wouldn't have to find goblins. The goblins would flock to them instead. Suho clenched his fist and met the charging goblins head-on. The force behind his raw punch was so powerful that it tore a hole through a poor goblin's body without resistance. Suho continued testing his raw strength with more brutal punches. He made one goblin's face cave in with a single strike. Alone in the midst of a goblin downpour, the young monarch showed them the difference between a literal god and a mere monster. Fighting goblins had already become boring with how easy it was. But since he was required to kill a lot of them, he could give himself a little handicap to make it more fun. He blew the horn flute once more, attracting the attention of a nearby goblin tribe. Then he did it again and riled up monsters from far and wide. After some more blowing, a fearsome army of goblins had gathered at their location, eager to attack with their lives on the line. Suho reckoned he would need at least these many enemies to make the fight more interesting. Using the corpses of the first ones he killed with his bare hands, he ordered his shadow army to arise. Gray fought alongside Suho, menacingly tearing through the paper-thin defense of the green bastards. The shadow goblins were also putting in work, mercilessly tearing through enemy lines without fear of death. As for Suho, he looked like a professional MMA fighter beating up a bunch of bloodthirsty kids. It didn't take long for the party to accomplish the daily quest for Shadow Dungeon cleanup. Gray had fought for 3 hours straight, and he was too exhausted from the intensity of trying to keep up with Suho. Surrounded by more than 100 goblin corpses in all directions, the system asked Suho if he would like to check his rewards. He stared at the system prompt for a few seconds, seemingly contemplating something. Suho believed the quest's numbers looked a little strange. The quest had been completed, but killing a surplus of goblins still increased the number past the 100 kills required. He smirked, thinking he had just stumbled upon something extra interesting. If the count continued to increase, then there could be a hidden reward or something. He wanted to use this chance to experiment with the quest counter even more. Gray's exhausted self didn't like the sound of that at all. By the end of the hunt, the party managed to kill 200 goblins, 20 goblin commanders, and 2 goblin centurions, precisely double the initial cap. Double the fatigue for the poor young wolf, too. He was basically a wiped-out ghost at this point. Suho was right to think there was a hidden reward for performing above the system's standard. Upon checking the rewards, he was granted an instant status recovery, 3 ability points, and an option between a random blessed box or a random cursed box. He accepted the first reward, and his body was filled with vitality, recovering to perfect condition as though he had just leveled up. He could also bank this instant recovery to use in a more dire situation, like in the middle of a fight. As for the second reward, it was just a few extra ability points, but he recognized that these points would get harder and harder to come by as he leveled up more, so free daily points were much appreciated. The last reward presented him with 2 intriguing choices. A random blessed box would provide the player with an item he wants, while the random cursed box would provide the player with an item he needs. If Suho got what he wanted, he wouldn't get what he might need, and vice versa. What he wanted was too vague, and he was in need of many different things. So he decided to choose the random cursed box. Inside was an item called Vulcan's Horn. It was a scaly, heavy gauntlet fit for his fighting style. It was made from the horn of the avaricious demon, Vulcan. It would increase physical damage by 30% and could devour demon souls to become stronger. Turning ordinary shadow soldiers into weapons would be impractical, so he needed a separate armament. This gauntlet was perfect for that. Suho immediately tried that badass weapon on, and the fit was practically perfect. He was excited by the ability to hunt demons and increase his new toy's damage output with every kill. It was a little heavy, so he decided to invest more points into strength. All he needed was some demons to hunt, and he could grow this thing to terrifying heights. Suddenly he noticed Gray's trust level in Suho had changed from respect to fear. Beru had to remind the young monarch that the Fang's heir wasn't a shadow soldier with infinite stamina. It was a good thing the hunt was finished, and Suho had to take care of a few things in the outside world. Upon exiting the Shadow Dungeon, Suho locked in on the Grim Reaper Guild, which was supposed to be connected with the Hyena Guild. Just as he was thinking about where to start his investigation, his phone started buzzing with messages. Instructor Im had been spamming him with requests for help. Not too long after that, Suho found himself in Seoul Station Field, a notorious danger zone. Instructor Im was already suited up on site and waiting for Suho's arrival. He was supposed to go into a dungeon today, but the whole collecting team ghosted him at the last minute. None of his coworkers turned up for work. Those jerks probably went somewhere to drink together without including him. Seeing his instructor in need of help, Suho offered his assistance. If he was going in as a member of the collection team, he would have to wear protective clothing before entering. Working as a collector was a lot more dangerous than working as an excavator after all. While the excavation team only goes in after the hunt is done, the collecting team sticks closely behind the strike team to take care of the monster corpses. The protective clothing would shield them from sudden ambushes, thorns, scales, or any of the million things that could injure them inside. Fascinated, Suho went ahead and put on the protective equipment. Finally, the strike team arrived, and they were not happy to see only 2 people in the collection team. Im bowed his head and apologized profusely for the absence of the rest of the team. But they were supposed to be under contract, and the strike team had paid the Grim Reaper Guild a lot of cash for the entrance ticket to this dungeon. The leader of the strike team threatened to report them to the association if they lagged and slowed down the hunt. Im Dog-yoon was forced to take the threats. He wasn't even the collection team leader, but he was the one getting the heat. He could only rely on Suho from this point onwards. Suho eyed the strike team and counted 4 D-rank magic-type hunters, 5 D-rank combat-type hunters, and 1 C-rank healer. That angry guy who shouted at them must be the healer and strike team leader. Through the random cursed box, Suho got something he would need. Given that Vulcan's horn devours demon souls, it wouldn't be too absurd to expect it to come in handy in this dungeon. Instructor Im's timely call and a field-type dungeon owned by the Grim Reaper Guild. Everything might not be as simple as it seemed. Deep inside this dungeon's grimy walls, the agonized screams of the Mistborns echoed. In front of them stood full-fledged demons that didn't belong on Earth. There were 3 of them, each one uglier than the last, and they looked like bad news. Suho's intuition was already telling him that something dangerous was bound to happen. The strike team worked fast. They immediately went into hunting mode as soon as they had a clear view of the target. Melee fighters and tanks were at the front, while magic casters stayed at the back with the healer. They adopted a simple yet effective combat formation. Just a few meters ahead, some scaly lizard beasts crept and crawled on the floor. Since the collection team only consisted of 2 people, the strike team leader assigned them much closer to the action so they could collect quickly. Instructor Im was scared, but Suho didn't mind being closer to the fight. In fact, he was disappointed to see regular lizard monsters instead of demons to feed his Vulcan's horn. At least he would get the chance to see how hunter parties typically fought up close and personal. Through this, he could learn how different types of fighters use their specialties. He retrieved the key from his inventory and quietly opened the shadow dungeon to summon his new helpers. Through the daily cleanup quest, he had managed to store some goblin commanders and goblin centurion corpses in his domain. With the increase in his intelligence stat, his shadow soldier limit had increased to 7. After a few minutes, the strike team finally finished dealing with the first wave of monsters. The leader decided they needed to take a breather before pushing further. He reckoned that even if they wanted to hunt more, there was no way a 2-member collection team could keep up with their pace. Their logistic support was holding them back, but when he looked back, he saw 7 goblins working together seamlessly to load lizard monster corpses onto their carts. They had already finished the collection. Fascinated, the team leader asked Suho if he had summoned these little goblins. The young monarch did not bother denying it. Instead of picking another fight, the team leader grabbed Suho's hands and gripped them tightly. He desperately pleaded with Suho to become an exclusive collection team member of his strike team. But this was just an impromptu side gig for the young man. The team leader offered to pay him the highest possible salary based on the market, but his recruitment attempts were interrupted by a disturbance brewing ahead. The scouts had discovered a normal person's corpse along the way. The team leader quickly checked it out, and they arrived at the spot where the abnormal corpse had been spotted. Seeing that the body was wearing everyday accessories, it was highly likely this was just a normal person, not even a hunter. What was odd was the presence of burns around the lifeless body, even though they had never heard of any monster using fire in Seoul Station. But the 2-man collection team was familiar with that fire, those burns, and that ghostly appearance. Suho told the team leader they were likely looking at a mistborn. As far as every hunter knows now, mistborns was a new type of monster that burned with an eerie blue flame. Instructor Im corroborated the identification. He had seen some up close after all. Then, the scouts ahead started finding even more dried-up mistborn corpses. This spooked some of the hunters. They turned to the captain for their next move, with some considering stopping the hunt and reporting the incident to the association first. The team leader admitted that this was a strange phenomenon. Normal civilians had turned into deathly burning monsters, but he was confident the party was strong enough to handle what lay ahead without any issues. Finally, he decides to ignore the bad omen and orders his men to get ready to push even deeper, shocking Suho. This was not the time to take such risks. He tried to warn them that these mistborns were very dangerous, but the strike captain asserted that he was the one calling the shots. The collection team should just shut up, follow behind, and do their jobs. Instructor Im was not ready to see mistborns again. He already had enough trauma from before. Suho turned to him and warned him to be ready to use his running ability at any moment. If something went wrong, the anxiety-ridden instructor would have to run for his life. They had no idea what lay ahead of these abandoned train tracks after all. Deeper in the tunnels of Seoul Station, the blue flame of the mistborns burned bright, except they weren't using it to attack. The blue fire was being used to burn their bodies instead. People had been captured, transformed, tied up in a formation, and burned in a hellish blaze while literal demons watched from the sidelines. Beastmass complained that their flames weren't nearly strong enough as they had a firewood supply problem that urgently needed fixing. Insect had just received news that there was a problem at their regular supply grounds and that the firewood wasn't moving smoothly. They might have to ask that human to come up with a new way to get supplies. Beastman concurred that they urgently needed replenishment. It seemed he had a hard time speaking human language. It was simply a pain in the ass that the pathetic Hyena Guild, their firewood supplier, had been taken down so easily. At this rate, their stardust production output would lag behind that of the other factories. Just then, Beastman started sensing the presence of a few people above. It seemed some foolish hunters had arrived just in time to solve their firewood problem. Beastman volunteered to take care of the hunters while the other two continued preparing the summoning ritual. They reminded him to capture the hunters alive. Taking his great blade, Beastman followed the scent of the foolish intruders. Meanwhile, the strike team pushed deeper and deeper into the abandoned tracks of Seoul Station, killing many lizard monsters along the way and slowly depleting their stamina. The strike captain healed some of his men's minor injuries while celebrating today's bountiful harvest. Everyone was glad they had continued hunting instead of retreating. It also helped that they had an outstanding collection team today. The strike captain was in such a good mood that he contemplated using something he had been saving for the right moment. He had a single sphere of stardust in his pocket. The other hunters knew this was a miracle mana amplification stimulant that was selling like hotcakes. It was hard to come by, even if the effects only lasted a week. Nevertheless, it could increase the rank of a lower-ranked hunter by 1. If the strike captain consumed it now, his mana would soar above C rank. Distracted by the stardust, no one saw the threat looming in the dark. The Beastman demon closed the distance between himself and the hunting party in the blink of an eye. His presence triggered everybody's fight or flight response instantly. He raised his massive great blade and slashed it down on the strike captain's shoulder, trying his hardest to hold back and keep the firewood alive. The poor captain didn't even get to taste the stardust he had splurged on as it scattered on the ground. Finally realizing that an enemy had reached their location, and seeing the captain knocked out cold and bleeding profusely, the rest of the party didn't know what to do. In front of them was a monster that could speak human language, albeit a little broken and awkward. Whatever the case, they needed to lock in, or they'd undoubtedly get wiped out. Beastman carefully counted his targets, pointing his great sword at the scared hunters one by one. There were a total of 10 people in this narrow railroad tunnel. It would be tough, but it was absolutely doable. To ensure he could capture everyone alive to use as firewood, the demon took out a stardust sphere from his pocket. Everyone instantly recognized that sphere in the beast's hand, but they were not expecting to see a monster consume this miracle drug. Beastman opened his maw and shoved his entire hand and arm deep into his throat, getting that ball of power deep inside. The remaining D and C ranked hunters charged forward, hoping to gang up on the enemy before the stardust took effect. Unfortunately for them, stardust was fast-acting, and its effects showed in the Beastman's attack. The demon quickly dispatched the first wave of hunters who dared to point their weapons at him. Magic users hurled their spells at the beast but missed by a wide margin. They were the next ones to fall victim to the blade. The demon was just too fast to touch with mediocre weapons and spells. Without the magic users lighting the way, the remaining hunters were plunged into the darkness of the tunnel. Running around like blind rats, they were quickly neutralized. By the end of the fight, Beastman was covered in human blood. He dragged the foolish hunters back to the deepest recesses of Soul Station. The firewood had been secured. The collection team was still working on transporting the lizard beast corpses when Suho received a new quest. He was tasked with rescuing 7 survivors captured by the demons. His reward would depend on the number of people he could rescue. Just as he anticipated, he would have to fight against demons in this god-forsaken dungeon. Beru noticed the shift in Suho's demeanor, and the young monarch gave him a rundown of the quest. Seeing that his rewards would depend on the number of people he could save, things could go south very soon. First, he warned Instructor Im to get the hell out of the dungeon, citing that his gut told him something had happened to the strike team. Suho even sent 2 goblins to escort the instructor back to the entrance. When Instructor Im heard that the young man would be trying to find the strike team, he felt his powerlessness yet again. But he knew he would just be a hindrance if he stayed. So, he would get out and ask the Hunter Association for help as soon as he could. With that taken care of, Suho called Gray out of the shadow dungeon. He immediately bonded and fused with the Fang's air and activated his white-haired Super Saiyan form with Vulcan's horn equipped. Time was of the essence. They needed to move swiftly. Pushing his feet off the ground, Suho darted deeper into the dark railroad tunnel. Along the way, he saw signs of struggle and slaughter as fresh blood painted the tracks and walls leading to a doorway. Each hunter was dragged into the room where the demons were doing their thing. Beastman worked fast, faster than his fellow demons expected. The gate would open soon, and more demons would be summoned to Earth. Beastman did all the work to secure firewood, and now he also had to arrange it. Since they had plenty of firewood to feed the fire, they should be able to produce a new batch of stardust without any issues. They were taught to make poison using secret demonic techniques, formulating a stimulant derived from this berserk poison. Stardust was formed. A normal berserk poison would enhance magic power, but would eat at the user's life force. However, they found that using mistborn flames from hell instead of demonic essence curbed the side effects. Beastmask credited this breakthrough to the apostles who taught them this method. In his eye was the same sigil that Brocky had. Even the mistborns, irrational monsters made by corrupting the souls of living beings, were brought to this world by the apostle. Thanks to that, low-ranking demons like this train station-dwelling trio now had the chance to become stronger. Just as they were about to continue synthesizing the miracle drug, the man of the hour finally arrived. The demon trio stood on guard as they felt a swift presence heading in their direction. They watched the sealed door with bated breath, expecting yet another dud of a hunter to come through. Sung Suho kicked the steel gates open with a single powerful kick. Beastman immediately leaped into action with his great sword in hand. The young monarch had finally arrived, and he looked fly as hell. He laid eyes on the grotesque monsters in front of him. There was no doubt about it. These were actual demons. As for the tied-up mistborns in the bizarre contraptions, he reckoned that they were being burned for some form of ritual. Fortunately, the 7 survivors identified by the system were still safe. His thoughts were interrupted by a swinging blade aiming to separate his head from his body. Suho calmly leaned back, and Matrix dodged that great sword like a beast. Beastman was alarmed that this human managed to evade his attack. The young monarch quickly assumed a combat pose and questioned the demons. He clapped back with a punch enhanced by Vulcan's horns, sending Beastman hurling back. That human just pushed their youngest back, even with Stardust enhancement. They quickly decided to join the fray. Suho continued raining down punches, not giving Beastman any space to retaliate. Unfortunately for the young monarch, these demons were smart enough to coordinate an attack if need be. Given the size and brute force difference, he was forced to flip away. He was not expecting these demons to be wily enough to trap him from behind, so he did not see the demonic spell being prepared on his rear. The insect's disgusting clawed hands produced electrifying energy aimed at the intruder. He injected that shocking power right into Suho's body, ripping through every cell of the young man. While he was being electrocuted, Beastman took advantage of the opportunity and charged with his great blade, ready to slice and dice the stunned target. Through the agony of being shocked to his core, the young monarch managed to make his shadow soldiers arise. The goblins that were just collecting monster corpses from earlier were good enough to be used as meat shields in this desperate situation. Seeing the shadow goblins, the demons seemed to recognize the technique. The momentary distraction gave Suho enough of a window to throw the spellcaster off his back and regain control. Insect tried to warn Beastmask, the big boss, of those shadows, but the perceptive demon had already noticed. It was the same power they saw on the day the demons were nearly exterminated. The authority of the Shadow Monarch, but it was utterly weak compared to the power of the real Shadow Monarch. Weak enough for Beastman to tear through the goblin encirclement with ease. Suho stood from afar menacingly, seemingly assessing his next move. The demon trio composed themselves. As long as they were not fighting the real Shadow Monarch, they reckoned there was no need to be scared of a single human. According to Suho's estimation, each individual demon was weaker than Brocky. The problem was their flawless synergy when working together as a team. If he kept reviving his goblins, it would just be a waste of mana. He might have to use that method. Back when he defeated the hyena, he asked Baru to keep the corpse intact so he could store Brocky's remains for future use. His sharp vision and senses made him think of something as Brocky breathed his last breath. If Suho was right and the hyena died full of regrets for being controlled by Iterim, then his shadow might help and run rampant as a bloodthirsty warrior once more. To do that, the young monarch was respectful enough to ask for Gray's permission. The Fang's heir must have known that it would be for the best, so he gave Suho free rein to do what he needed. Using the key, he accessed the shadow dungeon once more. With the gate open, he made the strongest shadow in his arsenal rise from the dead. If Brocky wanted to redeem himself after death, then Suho would gladly give the hyena a chance to fight again. He tried his hardest to reach into Brocky's soul. Eventually, the beast's shadow started to burst out of the lifeless body and darted out of the portal in a rush. Out of the portal came the former guardian of the Fang's heir. He was a beast, powerful and clever enough to establish his own criminal guild. Brocky, the giant hyena shadow, had joined the match. Seeing this hulking shadow beast made the demons recoil a little. Brocky's insanely vicious howl filled the air. Now, it wasn't just an unfair 1 versus 3 anymore. It had become a competitive 3 versus 3. The demons were very familiar with Brocky. They did business together after all. Seeing him in shadow form just confirmed that this young man was the one who caused problems for their production line. With Suho, Gray, and Brocky teaming up on one side, this should be a good fight. Baru was starting to feel left out. If only he had his original strength. For now, all Suho could do was try and defeat these demons and banish them back to whatever hellhole they came from. While the fight raged on, the summoning portal started changing color. It turned crimson red as a fearsome aura began emanating from within. A woman emerged from the portal, a being summoned from the deepest depths of hell. She looked at the situation before her and saw destruction and conflict. She also felt a familiar presence. She wondered who in the world summoned her, believing that this was the work of the demons who wanted her dead. Looking at the action in front of her, that might not be the case. The appearance of a shadow soldier puzzled the demon. Meanwhile, Suho was too preoccupied exchanging blows with Beastman to pay attention to anything else. Anticipating a wide swing, Suho raised his gauntlet to meet the attack. This time, he managed to latch Vulcan's horn right into the demon's great sword. Pulling the enemy closer, Suho delivered a killer knee strike to the throat. It made the demon groan in agony as he spat out a handful of blood. With this, the momentum should be entirely on Suho's side. He just needs to land the last hit. Thankfully, he did not get greedy as he sensed something dangerous from the corner of his eyes. Suho reacted quickly, jumping away and making space as if a pesky lightning bolt had missed him entirely. It's practically impossible to finish off an enemy with one of the demons providing support using magic on the sidelines. With that interference, all the momentum Suho had built vanished. The combination of these 3 demons is way too tough to deal with. They fight like a unit, and if it continues, Suho will surely run out of mana because of Gray's possession. Even Brocky is already reaching his limit just from holding one of the demons down. As a shadow soldier, he's weaker than his original self after all. Suho needs to split up the enemies so he can beat them up one by one. But how? At that moment, the summoned demon jumped to the battlefield with her spear in hand. She turned to Suho and angrily asked where the hell was Mr. Sung Jinwoo. The heir of the Shadow Monarch was stunned. A wounded female demon knight just appeared and started asking about his dad. Beru took a second to recognize the demon knight. When he finally did, he asked what she was doing in this world. The demon knight immediately recognized the Shadow Ant's voice. She jumped onto Beru and squeezed the poor guy out. She asked Beru about Sung Jinwoo and Suho, but that would be too long of a story to discuss in the middle of a demon fight. The demons noticed that their summoned sacrifice seemed to know the enemies. They knew it would be troublesome if she joined the humans. She was just relieved to see Beru alive and well, because that also means Sung Jinwoo's somewhere out there. She can finally rest easy. Beru tasked her with taking care of the demons while they postponed the reunion and story time for later. The enemies shifted their target to the wounded demon first. They only need her blood to make stardust, so they can afford to get rough. Suho was worried that the demon knight might not be fit for the job of fighting other demons with her injuries. But Beru assured him that low-ranking goons were no match for her. She is Ezel after all. When the Shadow Monarch destroyed the demon world, her household, the Lader clan, was the only noble demon household spared. And in human metrics, her abilities are on par with an S-rank hunter. Suho was shocked. This means he can finally see how an S-rank expert fights. The battle started off with a literal bang as an explosion rang from the demon's side. Then came the pained screams of Ezel as she lost grip of her weapon. Beru and Suho were perplexed. They were expecting a show, but not this kind of show. Ezel was launched back to Beru's side as the Shadow Ant asked her how she became so weak. Now that he's looking at her closely, even the amount of mana in her body has become so much lower than before. That was because about half a year ago, most of the remaining demons in the demon world started a rebellion. House Ladir fought as best as they could but failed to quell the rebellion themselves. Ezel was able to survive thanks to the sacrifice of her clan, but her blood and power were taken while she was on the run. She asked if Beru could lend her some power, but that would just be a waste of mana. Right now, Suho has 2 nerfed allies without their powers. Lucky him. Talking so loudly in front of the demons was a mistake. They heard that Ezel was a weakened survivor of the Ladir household. This is their best chance to become stronger by consuming noble demon blood. Suho and Braki reset their positions for the second round. If Suho could isolate his opponent, he's confident of taking at least 1 down. Thankfully, Beru might have the answer to that problem. The time has come to show a bit of his strength after recovering some mana. Beru used his skill, Harsh Orders, and aimed his hand at Ezel. A fiery power quickly filled her up. Harsh Orders increased Ezel's stats by 50%, but has put the Curse of Insanity on her as a side effect. This was the perfect way to utilize the useless Ezel effectively. Suho was a little disturbed, but he knew that he must take advantage of the situation and lock in. Braki reunited with the demon he was wrestling with. It was a full-on beast brawl. Under the buff and curse of Harsh Orders, Ezel furiously charged forward without any regard for safety. The demon met her spear with a barrier. Beastman took advantage of her blind spot and attacked from behind. Fortunately, Suho was there to thwart the sneak attack as he locked Beastman's head with his arms. He landed and pivoted his position at the same time and held the demon's head as tightly as he could. Finally, he threw that son of a bitch far enough to be isolated from any kind of assistance. While Beastman is still up in the air, Suho's already making his next move. Suho caught up to his prey with his insane agility. He snuck behind the crazed demon and cut its whole body in half in the blink of an eye. Suho's blade cut through that demon's body like a hot knife through butter. Killing a low-ranked demon leveled him up. With his first demon kill, Vulcan's horn finally devoured its first demon soul, increasing its bonus physical damage output to 31%. Meanwhile, the buffed and cursed Ezel is still trying to break through the spellcaster's barrier. With one of them down, the pressure is on for the demons. Ezel's enraged state continued to burn intensely, but Beru's harsh orders are limited by the target's energy, and Ezel has finally used up her reserves, ending the effects. The spellcasting demon was stunned. 1 second, he was being hounded by a crazy Ezel. The next, it was dead silent. But Ezel played her role perfectly. She bought enough time for Suho to go sicko mode on these bastards. Using raw arm strength and Vulcan's horn, the young monarch tore the demon's head away from its body. Another demon's soul was devoured by his gauntlet. With 2 down, there's only 1 demon left to deal with. Beastmask realized that he was the one with the numbers disadvantage now. He cursed his demon brothers for being useless bastards, but he refused to give in and give up. Braki has been playing some defense, but the demon's next move caught him off guard. Beastmask ignored the Shadow Soldier entirely and targeted the unconscious Ezel instead. He reckoned that he could get stronger by directly consuming the blood of a noble demon. But before Beastmask can get even remotely close to her, Suho stops the beast with a stomp. This simple attack took out one of the demon's legs entirely. Beastmask looked at the young monarch, regretting making an enemy of such a wild card. Suho just smugly looks at the demon while he orders Braki to go crazy as long as the Shadow Soldier leaves enough of the demon's body intact to absorb. Like the good boy that he is, Brocky did as he was ordered and tore the demon up with his sharp fangs. A few minutes later, Essel starts regaining her consciousness. Beru hesitantly asked if she was still alive. Right now, Essel's just curious about Suho's real identity. He's another human who can use shadow soldiers after all. The shadow ant jabbed that Essel's just not loyal enough, so she can't recognize the young monarch. He urged Essel to dig deep into her memory to see who Suho really is. Meanwhile, Suho and Gray separated as the battle against the demons concluded. He reached level 20, gaining access to the system's store feature. Essel finally recalled a memory of Sung Jinwoo holding Suho as an infant. Who would have thought that she would be summoned to the world of the young monarch? Meeting the young monarch after all these years came as quite a shock to Essel. She could not recognize him because of how different he looked now. However, upon closer inspection, she could see Suho's uncanny resemblance to Sung Jinwoo. The realization and the total exhaustion of her energy knocked Essel out once more. Beru examined Essel for any complications, but it seemed like she had just fainted. There was no need to be worried. The kidnapped D and C-ranked hunters were still unconscious, but they had been saved. Suho was even kind enough to heal them up. Finally, the quest to rescue the survivors ended in complete success. All 7 survivors were saved. With that success comes the rewards. Suho was bestowed with 3 ability points and 700 gold. This was the first time he encountered this gold currency in the system, so it was perplexing. He remembered that with his level up came the system store, so he quickly opened the store window. In there, he can use gold to buy all sorts of items. For some reason, completing quests and earning money reminded him of his younger days when his dad would give him pocket money after finishing errands. The sweet memory painted a nostalgic smile on his face. Come to think of it, his dad designed and gave him the system. The Shadow Monarch is basically just giving him pocket money for a job well done. Suho bought some low-grade healing potions from the shop and was surprised to find out that he could not share the consumables with other people. Still, he wanted to try to feed the potion to poor Essel. He poured the red liquid down her mouth, and the healing effect quickly kicked in. Beru does not approve of wasting precious gold on a useless demon, but he knew just how generous the young monarch was. Since they can't leave an unconscious demon behind inside a dungeon, bringing her to the Shadow Dungeon is the next best thing. While Suho opened his personal dungeon, Brocky was left in charge of hauling the demon corpses scattered all over the floor. As for the young monarch himself, he still has something left to do before joining the others at the Shadow Dungeon. He picked up one of the demon's blades and went over to the contraption filled with chained-up people burning in hellfire. They have long since been turned into Mistborns. When Suho first saw Mistborns, he sensed a look of pain in them as they burned. He apologized to them as the only thing he can give them right now is a swift death. Using Storm Slash, he obliterated the stardust-making facility. Outside of the Soul Station dungeon, various hunters have gathered. According to their investigation, thorn lizards and mistborn corpses littered the dungeon. However, based on the injuries of the dead hunters, it did not look like they were killed by monsters. There's also a partially destroyed underground room filled with sword marks. Instructor Eam did as he promised, and brought back some help, leading to this investigation. The investigator in charge curiously asked Instructor Im about Sung Suho. When asked where Suho is at the moment, Instructor Im started bullshitting. He claimed that after Suho came out of the dungeon with him, the kid went to a safe place to hide. They were just weak E-rank hunters after all. The lead investigator seriously patted him on the shoulder and praised him for doing the right thing and asking for help, just as the hunter manual had instructed. With the questioning finally done and the investigation continuing further, Instructor Im finally sighed in relief. Based on the fragmented information from the investigation team, Instructor Im deduced that Suho probably saved the hunters who survived. He's aware that the kid's hiding his rank for an unknown reason, but he's certain that it's not for something nefarious. He'll just respect Suho's privacy and wait until the young man tells him what's going on. In the Shadow Dungeon, the ruined city looked as desolate as ever. The gang used one of the buildings as a temporary spot to gather, while Essel got the rundown of what happened with Sung Jinwoo. Beru valiantly recounted how the Shadow Monarch departed from Earth to stop the invasion of the Outer Gods' armies. Beru was initially tasked to release the young monarch's seal, but Suho did that on his own. Suho interjected and asked Essel if they had ever met before. She smiled and answered that they had been in the tutorial stage that Suho had gone through. For some reason, his memories from back then are still too hazy and vague. Suho tried to rack his brain for any useful tidbit of information and eventually remembered his time with Essel. He recalled that Essel surrendered as soon as she saw him. Beru scolded her for doing a half-assed job when she was supposed to test the young monarch. Now, it's Essel's turn to explain how she became so weak and what really happened in the demon realm. After Sung Jinwoo eradicated the Demon King and the other demon nobles, the Ladir household became the #1 powerhouse in the realm. They've waited for the Shadow Monarch's call. Decades have passed, and the Shadow Monarch's call never came. So, They continued living a peaceful and prosperous life until the problems arose half a year ago. A magic power amplification stimulant known as Stardust was distributed all across the demon realm. That was also the same thing that the demons Suho just killed were yapping about. Stardust doesn't have much effect on high-ranked demons with high latent magic power, but for low-ranked demons, it's a miracle drug that increases magic power without paying any price. With the absence of the Shadow Monarch, they seized the opportunity to rise up. The demons started to band together with one goal in mind: to rebel against the Ladir household. The rebellion quickly devolved into an all-out war of death and destruction. The Ladir household tried their hardest to protect the demon castle that Sung Jinwoo entrusted them, but they were too weak to defend against the rebellion of demons juiced up on Stardust. Essel and her clan ended up losing the war. The rebel demons did not stop there. They even drew blood from their prisoners of war. Eventually, they progressed to drinking the pure blood of demon nobles directly, hungry for more power. Essel's father and the rest of her clan were sacrificed. She herself has lost most of her strength from such evil practices. Until now, she still blames herself for being so pathetic and surviving alone while her entire bloodline gets erased. With the demon realm stolen, she doesn't even know what to tell Sung Jinwoo if they meet. Suho simply and genuinely told Essel that she did great. He often thinks of what his dad would do or say in his position. Essel and her household fought tooth and nail with their lives on the line. Suho is certain that his dad would praise the Ladir household for their sacrifice. Suho himself is also thankful to the Ladir household for staying true to their vow with his dad until the very end. From now on, he will help Essel revive the Ladir household together to the best of his abilities. She was speechless. All she could picture was Sung Jinwoo's reliable frame, casually claiming that he'd help her household become #1 while mispronouncing Ladir. A single tear kissed Essel's cheek as she stared into Suho's eyes. Out of nowhere, the system alerted him that the last survivor of the pure-blood demon nobles, Essel, wished to express her thanks to him. Essel wiped her tears away and smiled for the first time in a while. Suho's system prompted him to decide whether he wished to recruit the descendant of White Flames as his teammate. He was stuck in his seat in shock. Essel is a descendant of one of the monarchs like him and Grey. Maybe the system took the fact that she's the only pure-blood demon noble left into consideration. Suho's answer was an easy yes. And so, the descendant of the White Flames is now his teammate. With their connection, the bond skill has also appeared. The skill is called Demon Blast. Currently, its charge is 0%. Essel freaked out as soon as the status window opened in front of her. Suho didn't know that the descendants shared windows since Grey couldn't talk, but it should make things easier. This is also the first time Essel has heard that she's a descendant of White Flames. The gang got out of the abandoned building and found a more fitting setting for what they were about to do. Suho wanted to test the new bond skill with Essel. She was a little nervous and jumpy, but she wanted to be of use to the young monarch. As soon as Demon Blast was activated, Essel's entire body was engulfed with pale white flames. When she turned into an avatar made entirely of white fire, a concentration of demonic energy coalesced in her hands. Suho instinctively became in tune with the demonic energy, siphoning and manifesting the power in his fists. Before they could proceed with more tests, Essel turned back to her normal appearance and fell to the ground. She grimly apologized for ruining the test. Her energy reserves were depleted after attempting the skill just once. Suho assured her not to worry and just rest. He could feel the demonic power surging through his arms, curious as to just how strong the bond skill really was. Essel was just pleased that there was a skill where she could send her power to the young monarch. Believing that it must be a powerful attack, Suho closed his fist and delivered his most brutal punch on the side of one of the abandoned structures. The punch left an underwhelming amount of destruction, almost as if he just punched normally. Suho and Beru were underwhelmingly amazed at how little the effects were. It's safe to say that Demon Blast is a lot different from Grey's bond skill. The mischievous wolf made sure to gloat that his bond skill was still on top. Maybe there was no discernible effect because of the 0% charge amount. Since the skill doesn't say how to charge the power, using Demon Blast is unusable for now. Suddenly, Beru turned to the young monarch for a request. He wanted permission to eat the demon corpses they stashed away. Suho stored the dead demons away to perform shadow extraction on them later, so Beru might not get his request granted. The young monarch beckoned his hand on top of the demon corpses and muttered, "Arise." But the system warned him that with the target's corrupted mana, shadow extraction was unavailable. Even Sung Jinwoo can't extract shadows from demons as their souls are far too corrupted. That's also why he just summoned demons through contracts, like the one he had with the Ladir household. Since he can't do anything about corrupted demon souls, the corpses might as well be Beru's lunch. The gang must have forgotten that Essel's a demon too. Seeing her weakly sit by the wall to support herself, Suho handed another potion to Essel. She felt a little awkward for inconveniencing the young monarch too much. Since she does not have any place to stay right now, Suho gave her free access to the Shadow City area. The system took care of it and assigned a portion of the Shadow Dungeon as the White Flames territory under the jurisdiction of Isol Ladir. Since they are teammates now, Suho encouraged her to be open and not fret about the details. Their sweet interaction was cut short by Beru's sudden screech. The Shadow Ant is still busy chewing on rancid demon meat while trying to tell the young monarch a detail he got in the demon's memories. He unexpectedly found a clue about Itarim's apostle. The gang quietly gathered once more, eagerly anticipating Beru's findings. Braki, Gray, Suho, and Essel sat side by side as they diligently listened to Beru's story. But before he gets into the nitty-gritty of things, there are some things that everyone must know. Stardust is already being distributed on Earth, and Mistborns are monsters from the outer universe. Stardust has gotten out of the demon realm, and Mistborns are more mysterious than initially thought. Whether it's fate or just sheer coincidence, the demons Beru ate are related to Braki and the Hyena Guild that Suho took down. The demons receive supplies of abducted humans from the Hyena Guild. They corrupt these humans until they turn into Mistborns to be used as materials to create Stardust. There are other places that manufacture the drug. They call them Stardust factories. To sum up what Beru learned, guilds would abduct humans, the Grim Reaper Guild would pass the supplies to the factories, and they would ultimately be used to synthesize the miracle drug. Beru is certain that Itarim is behind the entire operation in these three places. All evidence points to all of this being related to their invasion. But Beru added that a human created this Stardust manufacturing system. That human must be helping an Itarim's apostle hidden somewhere in the world. That human is none other than the vice CEO of the Grim Reaper Guild, Lee Min-sung. If they look into this guy, they should be able to get to Itarim's hidden apostle. Speaking of Lee Min-sung, an army of press and media representatives eagerly awaited his exit from a grandiose skyscraper. Finally, the man of the hour came out, and camera flashes started going wild. Lee Min-sung finally showed his face in public. A serious expression was plastered on his mug. Interview requests from random reporters came in left and right. All of them wanted to know the same thing. How did the Hunter Association's investigation go? Lee Min-sung curtly answered that the investigators found him innocent of any crime, as expected. But the people found it hard to believe that he did not know about Hyena Guild's criminal practices. Additionally, too many hunters have been dying in the Soul Field, a place managed by the Grim Reaper Guild. The scumbag put on his most devastated expression and started his performance. Lee Min-sung asserted that his guild had only done its best for a world that had plunged into chaos 2 years since the Great Cataclysm. They sponsored the Hyena Guild in hopes of nurturing their hunters to become a stronger helping force in the world. They even opened the Soul Field to hunters outside of the Grim Reaper Guild because he thought it would be a good place for new hunters to gain experience. He doubled down, insisting that their good intentions just happened to produce such horrid results. Lee Min-sung started crying and breaking down, blaming himself for not being careful enough to manage everything. He shivered at the thought of the deaths that resulted from his lack of foresight. With a final apology, the media made way for Min-sung and his security team. His flawless acting performance swayed everyone present to believe that the Grim Reaper Guild is just a victim too. They've only been doing good deeds up until now, and even the association found them innocent. With some fake tears and shakes, Lee Min-sung turned public opinion back in his favor, even being called a hero. Pulling off such simple acting is a piece of cake for someone like him. He used to be the top star of Asia after all. That aside, he was not expecting the old weasel of the Hunter Association to send him back without much interrogation. It must mean that they still don't know that Min-sung's the one supplying the market with Stardust. The scumbag had everyone absolutely fooled with his cunning, except for one person. Sung Suho has taken it upon himself to investigate and tail Lee Min-sung from the shadows. Surprisingly, Beru does not feel the nauseating energy of Itarim coming from Min-sung, which means he's not being controlled. The bastard's just being a scum for the love of the game. Suho reckoned that they could make sure of that right here and right now. Before he could take another step, Beru hurriedly stopped the young monarch from exposing himself. While it's true that they have defeated a few strong enemies, this time is different. Beru would gladly risk his life to stop Suho from doing something stupid. The mana Beru felt from Lee Min-sung was unusual and horrific, and it seemed like the scumbag sensed someone sneaking around nearby. His security team asked if there was a problem, and Min-sung just ignored the faint presence as he entered his car. Beru is certain that Suho is not at the level where he can defeat someone as strong as the A-rank hunter, Lee Min-sung. A fancy chandelier hangs on the ceiling. Expensive bottles of alcohol and fresh fruit were served on the table. This is Lee Min-sung's everyday life. Right now he's gloating about how easy manipulating people was. He changed public perceptions of his guild and himself with just a little acting. Articles about his innocence on all counts flooded the internet. All records of the Grim Reaper Guild were made public. Their noble intentions with the Soul Station Field Dungeon and the Hyena Guild were echoed by every publication. Lee Min-sung was in a celebratory mood until a woman called Madam came in carrying beaten-up bodyguards. Madam sure knows how to make an entrance. She ordered everyone else in the room to get out while Lee Min-sung barely paid attention to the madam. She hates him, and he hates her. Madam hates the brat who was born with a silver spoon and became a Korean star in his teenage years. It's no wonder his ego is enormous. But even his ego and pride were trampled upon after the Great Cataclysm. There was a great commotion over a celebrity like him becoming an A-rank hunter, but his driver became one of the rare S-rank hunters in the world. All news outlets put the spotlight on the driver. It was the first time that the hierarchy that had always held Lee Min-sung at the top turned upside down. Somehow, that driver ended up joining the Grim Reaper Guild created by Im Taegyu. Feelings aside, the madam came all the way to the club to talk business. The business is the miracle drug Stardust. Madam would like to buy some in bulk, but that's not possible right now. The distribution method and one of the factories were destroyed, and there was not enough supply for bulk orders. She trusts that the great Lee Min-sung would have his way, though. Not one to turn down a good deal, Lee Min-sung promised to try to talk to his business partner even if he's reluctant to. That strange kid had stopped listening to his orders after all. Back in the Shadow Dungeon, it's the daily goblin cleanup time. Gray has progressed as a fighter in his own right. His fangs are a death sentence to measly goblins. Essel also got the chance to show that she is not useless. Her spear can still mow down low-rank beasts. As for Suho, he's just doing young monarch things. Equipped with Vulcan's horn, he was like a meteor, killing everything along the way. His speed broke the goblins' ankles, and his attacks broke their souls. This is Sung Suho on Demon Time, an unstoppable freak of nature. After the first wave, he maintained his focus. The dust from the first round has not even settled yet, and Suho wants to summon the next round of goblins right away. Beru worries that the young monarch must be feeling impatient because of their talk about Lee Min-sung. Before the goblin cleanup, Beru was nice enough to do a little presentation regarding every piece of information they had at hand. The battle with Lee Min-sung is inevitable. To get the information on the Iterim Apostle out of the scumbag, they could either do some hardcore interrogation, or Beru could just eat the guy. Suho allowed him to eat humans as long as they were identified as evil after all. However, that plan would only work if they could defeat Lee Min-sung. Based on Beru's ability to detect the strength of others, he found the ranks of the gang accurate. In base form, the young monarch is currently at C rank. Gray is a little weaker on his own at D rank. And just like Suho, Essel is also a C rank. If she had not lost her strength, she would have been a powerhouse. When Suho and Gray use their bond skill, they barely surpass B rank in power. While there are differences in strength in the same rank, usually 10 D ranks are needed to defeat one C rank. Going up against a whole guild and the A rank Lee Min-sung is still an impossibility. Essel asked what Beru's rank was, and he simply answered that he was a general even though he's more like a foot soldier right now. Back to the present, the daily Shadow Dungeon cleanup quest has been completed. Suho was rewarded with status recovery, 3 stat points, and 1 random box. This time the numbers aren't going up even after he killed more than required. The hidden reward must be a one-time thing. Immediately opening the random box, he obtained an item called Ash Ring. It's a rank D accessory that simply increases the sense stat by 5. After equipping the ring, Suho could feel the enhancement to his senses. It's an excellent pickup, but it doesn't really change his situation right now. Eventually, he'll no longer be able to level up by killing goblins. Hunting 3 demons only increased Vulcan's horn's damage by 3%. Suho desperately wanted to grow stronger as fast as possible, but there aren't many methods to do that right now. If he wants to level up, he needs to enter dungeons and grind like a madman. Unfortunately, hunters and guilds contacting Suho only wanted him for excavations and collections. No one in their right mind would put an E rank in a strike team, and trespassing into a gate is illegal. Beru suggested getting his rank reevaluated, but a reawakening would be announced far and wide. It's safer to avoid that kind of publicity. Now that they're sure that Iterim's apostle is on Earth, Suho wants to hide his existence to avoid being used as his father's weakness. Lee Min-sung is trouble enough. The apostle would have a whole different level of headache. But Beru believes that they should not be that worried about the apostle. If they arrived here faster than Beru, they're probably not very strong due to the influence of dimensional transfer. Outer universe beings must possess the dimension crack to use dimensional transfer. This crack is very narrow, which makes it hard for mana to pass through, as it would create a lot of resistance. Expanding the outer walls is incredibly exhausting. Basically, the stronger the being, the longer it takes to perform a dimensional transfer. That's why the large army of Itarim and even Sung Jinwoo cannot come to Suho's universe so easily. To sum it up, the apostle on Earth is weak enough to undergo dimensional transfer quickly. That must be why they only made use of Brockie and the demons thus far. If the Itarim invasion progresses, right now would be the best chance for Suho to get stronger. Beru wondered if it was finally time to fulfill his next mission. Sung Jinwoo personally left the required decisions and processes up to his loyal general's discretion before heading to Earth. In case he needs help, Jinwoo simply asks Beru to give the key to a certain someone. Jinwoo believes that that person will definitely be of great help to his son in many ways. Beru can finally use the key that his lord has given him. Just as he was about to propose the idea to Suho, the young monarch remembered something very important. There is another method to legally go into a gate without drawing attention. This method brought Suho to a grandiose modern skyscraper in the middle of the city. In front of him was a person he hadn't seen in a while. The young monarch actually brought a business proposal with him. A proposal where neither party can lose. Beru was amazed that the young monarch would find the person his lord had mentioned without any help. The business proposal basically boils down to Uncle Yu Jinho, the CEO of Ajin Soft, assisting Suho in entering a gate. Beautiful World is a virtual reality game released 4 years ago. It has maintained its place at the top ever since. No one would have imagined that it was created by the immature youngest son of a certain conglomerate family. A few minutes before his meeting with the CEO of Ajin Soft, Suho was personally welcomed by one of the employees. It was his first time visiting his uncle's company, so it was a little nerve-wracking. He also noticed that there were an awful lot of awakened in the building. The employee noticed his puzzled look and explained that Ajin Soft hires a lot of awakened as not everyone is cut out for the riskiness of being a hunter going into dungeons. With the proper pay, they take on missions or work as guards. Ajin Soft is working on a new project after all. Based on the sound of it, they might be making a game related to hunters. As soon as they arrived at the penthouse, Yu Jinho gave Suho a warm and energetic welcome. It's been a while since they've last talked, as Suho's been busy trying to save the damn universe. Even so, he certainly grew up a lot since they'd last seen each other. Without wasting another second, Suho took the binder out of his bag and got right down to business. As established, it was a proposal where Ajin Soft would not suffer any losses at all. All they have to do is assist Suho in entering the gates. Uncle Jinho will help with purchasing gate rights and recruiting strike team members, and Suho will surrender all the magic essence crystal drops. He can solo a D and C rank dungeon easily after all. His boast doesn't really hold any water as he's official registered as an E rank hunter. Suho tried to explain, but Uncle Jinho was dead set on lecturing him about the dangers of hunting in a gate. The worrywart uncle considered that the young man might be doing this to investigate his father and mother's disappearance during the Great Cataclysm. He assured Suho that he was on the case and was still hiring more hunters to investigate. Beru quietly asked the young monarch if he intended to spill the truth. Suho came into this room with that idea in mind. With utmost sincerity and seriousness, he confessed that he's an awakened that can level up. He continued on about the invaders from the outer universe hiding on Earth. In order to stop the invasion, he needs to grind and level up. To do just that, he'll need access to dungeons to become stronger. Uncle Jinho simply replied with a question asking Suho if he heard about the solo leveling project. Jinho laughed and reckoned that he must be in a secret camera prank show. What Suho just described is the plot of a single-player game that Ajin Soft is working on right now. You play as an awakened who can level up alone. He starts as the weakest E rank, and then he surpasses even S ranks. Eventually, he becomes the strongest as the protector of the world. Suho believes that the story seemed awfully close to his father's life. In any case, Jinho proudly believes that he can never be tricked by such a simple prank. Beru finally came out of hiding and asked Jinho if he had vague memories from the previous world. It took a second to click, but Jinho eventually started freaking out at the ant face floating around his office. Beru finally offered to help. He referred to Jinho as a minion who followed behind the king in the forgotten time. Among all humans, Jinho had seen most of the Shadow Monarch's battles. Those powerful moments must be engraved in his soul. The ant shadow busted out the key as it would be faster just to use it rather than wasting time with another story time. As a gift from Sung Jinwoo, Beru plunged the key right into Yu Jinho's heart. His mind went blank, making way for the memories embedded in his soul. He opened his eyes in the middle of a room filled with infinite light. Jinho saw an armored silhouette walking closer and closer. When the knight came close enough, Jinho recognized the knight as his own mirror image. He started remembering how he met Sung Jinwoo, promising to protect the newbie. At that time, the Shadow Monarch worked as a porter, carrying the party's equipment. While Jinwoo is quiet as a church mouse, Jinho is a professional yapper. By the end of their first dungeon run together, Jinho valiantly stood beside Sung Jinwoo as a friend and an ally. After seeing how strong the Shadow Monarch really was, Jinho desperately begged for them to do regular dungeon runs together. There was a day when he got a full set of armor delivered from Italy in preparation for a raid. Sung Jinwoo, in his tracksuit, simply ordered him to take the ridiculous armor off. One drunken night, Jinho recognized Jinwoo as his benefactor who saved his life and helped him with raids. The Shadow Monarch was more like a brother than his actual brother. Jinwoo offered a toast to that sentiment. As long as Jinho thinks of him as a brother, he'll also think of him as his. Chunks of memories he cherished flooded back into his mind as Jinho's tears overflowed. In this world, he might be able to meet Jinwoo again. Suho had no idea what was happening, but there's no need for concern. The key simply made Jinho recover his previous world memories. By sundown, Suho had finished giving his uncle the rundown of the current situation. Since Jinwoo's limitless power has been inherited by his son to some extent, the answer is clear. Jinho can picture Jinwoo as the god of the outer universe, protecting everyone from Itarim. Even before, that guy had always been in a completely different league. Uncle Jinho scolded Suho for still bringing some business proposal when the fate of the world was on the line. Just like his father, he's a stickler for the rules. With a renewed understanding of the situation, Jinho figured that he should not treat Suho like a kid anymore, and accepted the proposal. Jinho could not imagine how Jinwoo endured such a tough trial all alone. But the monarch must have given Jinho this chance to tag in and help. From now on, Jinho made it his personal mission to assist Suho. Wearing his signature black mask, the young monarch arrived at his first stop, a dungeon in the middle of the woods. Some hunters gathered at the entrance, seemingly waiting for him. These are the strike team members Uncle Jinho hired to fill out the required numbers. An injured hunter is still skeptical as he was promised 4 million to be on the strike team without entering a gate while Suho enters alone. He does not know how confident the masked man is in his skills, but underestimating a gate is a death sentence waiting to happen. The injured hunter simply told Suho to call for help anytime. His legs might not be in the best shape, but he might still be able to help a little. Suho smiled and thanked the man for the fair warning. Finally, he entered the gate all by himself. His father took on numerous things on his own and continued to do so. But Suho is different. He always has Essel and Gray by his side. He reckoned that this team system that his father designed must be Sung Jinwoo's expression of warmth through hidden intentions. Right now, it's time for the son to act like the father and slaughter a whole dungeon. Suho is done letting his dad take on everything by himself. To be of help, he needs to start leveling up. Lee Min-sung's car pulled up to a building, and he instructed his driver to be on standby at close proximity. It's been 3 months since he last met his business partner. He entered the building with a face mask on, but was still recognized by one of the custodians. Thinking that it's important to maintain a good image, he smiled and thanked the old custodian for recognizing him. Even the public is cheering on him as the hero of hunters. Lee Min-sung loved the envy in the eyes of people when they looked at him. As a super elite born as the son of Yujin Construction's vice CEO, he made his debut as a child star, sweeping the world of advertisements. On a fast track within the celebrity world, he became known as the Prince of Asia, and after the Great Cataclysm, he became an A-rank awakened. He thought he could continue living as the apex predator, until his driver, Taegyu, awakened as a rare S-rank powerhouse. Since Taegyu is getting old, he's thinking of becoming a hunter as soon as he can. The Hunter Association suggested that he create a guild, and the first one he invited was Lee Min-sung. The scumbag's ginormous ego could not handle the disparity between him and his driver. Starting from that day, he was sure that the world was going to come crumbling down inevitably. Society's pyramid structure was flipped upside down, and his mission is to restore the balance to how it originally was. He will pursue this calling even if it means joining hands with the demon. Speaking of demons, lots of them have lined up with their disgusting smiles to welcome Lee Min-sung inside. He asked the bizarre demon guards where their boss was, and he heard a childish voice calling his name. Chills run down the scumbag's spine. Lee Min-sung saw the unique hair color and the piercing eyes and stopped in his tracks. Golden-eyed Kid Gojo is the freaking outer worlder and Itarim's apostle. The kid was just a baby the last time they saw each other. He had grown far too fast since then. Even his mana had increased by leaps and bounds. But the apostle cleared up that he was not growing up. He is simply recovering his original strength bit by bit. In order to undergo dimensional transfer, he had to split his body up. His strength and personality were fragmented, and he was sent to Earth. Among the fragments, his baby form was the weakest and was the first to arrive. The current version of the Apostle has fused with the second fragment already. While his memories remain, his personality is different. To put it simply, Kid Gojo does not like it when mere humans get too friendly with him. Well, Lee Min-sung doesn't care either way. He just needs assurance that their initial promise will be fulfilled. He wished for wealth, fame, and the head of the S-rank hunter, Taegyu. Min-sung was glad that his business partner remembered his end game. As for his reason for visiting, he gave the apostle the rundown of the damage their facilities have incurred recently. He came here to get some reinforcements for the dwindling Stardust supplies. The apostle was more curious about the attacks in their facilities, though. Lee Min-sung promised that the distribution system wouldn't have any issues, but that's precisely what they are having right now. Kid Gojo outrightly called out the scumbag's incompetence. He considered that his previous personality must have been wrong when choosing a pawn. If there's one thing Lee Min-sung doesn't like, it's being trash-talked. He quickly drew a hidden dagger from his leg and dashed behind the apostle, his blade ready to slice Kid Gojo's throat. Min-sung asserted that he's not a brainwashed empty shell. He's an A-rank hunter who could kill the apostle before being fully formed. In this position, he's not the pawn, but the apostle himself is pawn instead. Kid Gojo explained that human hunters determine ranks based on the quantity of mana as a symbol of strength. Such methods are simply uncivilized for his taste. Suddenly, the custodian from earlier was possessed by a mysterious energy spawning an Itarum halo above his head. Minsung paused as horrifying amounts of mana started surging in all directions. Families and people who were just minding their own business were afflicted with the same halo as the custodian. Kid Gojo brainwashed every human in the entire building without lifting a single finger. He made it clear to Minsung that he was picked for the sake of survival. But now that the apostle has the strength to survive, it's a different story. The relationship between them will change depending on how competent Minsung is. Awakened hunters under the influence of Itarum steadily flooded the room with their weapons drawn. They all had their eyes on Minsung. One wrong move and an entire battalion of mindless soldiers would mow him down. Minsung threw the dagger away and insisted that he was just testing if the kid could really kill an S-rank. Kid Gojo retracted the skill and released everyone under his influence. One of his loyal subordinates brought out a briefcase of stimulants made by condensing stardust 100 times. If Minsung dilutes the stimulants, he can produce a large amount of stardust quickly. However, these concentrated stimulants are different. If used as it is, it would have an effect even on an A-rank hunter. Kid Gojo urged Minsung to give it a try. Surprisingly, the scumbag refused to get high on his own supply. He is smart enough to not use something he knows nothing about. He's fully aware that he might have unleashed an unimaginable monster onto Earth. But as long as he gets his end of the deal, that's none of his business. As soon as Minsung left, Kid Gojo started feeling the presence of another one of his fragments arriving soon. If he can fuse with the fragment of strength, he will no longer need to stay in hiding when that time comes. Back in the scam dungeon, the gang is up against the boss monster, a giant serpent. Assel and Gray were no match on their own. Their attacks barely tickled the snake. While the two held aggro, Suho was already preparing for his assault. He jumped into the air and grabbed onto the serpent's body. His sudden mounting made the snake furious. The gang worried that the young monarch might be in danger. But if there's someone they should worry about, it should be the damned serpent. Suho continuously tightened his bear hug on the snake's body. Its scales shattered from the pressure. With one final compression, Sung Suho killed the boss monster by literally hugging that beast into two. As the enemy fell, Suho made his superhero landing flawlessly. Unbeknownst to the gang, Itarim's apostle is about to start the real invasion very soon. Posted up outside the dungeon, the hired hunters continued getting paid with every raid that Suho cleared. All they have to do is wait for the client to come out of the gate, and they'll get paid millions of won. All they have to do is keep their lips shut. This is the 4th time, and they've been getting the money without fail. Conquering a gate is an act of public service, but something doesn't sit right with this arrangement. But the hunters can't afford to quit. The gig was far too lucrative and easy to throw away. Well, it's definitely suspicious. The masked man enters by himself, so how is he earning anything without an excavation or collection team? They started at D-rank gates but have since then graduated to C-rank ones. Inside the dungeon, Baru is supervising the mining operations with the goblin shadows as workers. Essel and Gray were assigned to the collection team, dressing monster corpses. As for the young monarch, he's deep in the cavern, fighting a C-rank boss monster all by his lonesome. Suho dodged a triple strike from the boss's sharp limbs with ease. The enraged boss made a mistake and showed its disgusting insect abdomen. With a looted blade in his hand, Suho activated Storm Slash to desecrate the beast. His weapon's effect activated and paralyzed the monster, but due to its high resistance, the paralysis was weakened. Suho was just testing if his dagger's effect would work on spiders. Kasaka's Venom Fang is a C-rank dagger with a chance to inflict paralysis and bleed to the target. With Suho's experiment done, he resorted to his tried and tested method of fighting against bugs. He heaved the dagger right into the boss's face, enraging it even further. Up in the air, the young monarch was already charging up his fist for the next attack. Closing the distance in the blink of an eye, he delivered a punch with insane amounts of force. As he expected, squashing a bug is best done using bare hands. He activated the ruler's authority to catch and manipulate the dagger. It moved with precision and brutality, slashing at the bug. Chaining endless combos one after another, he juggled the C-rank boss monster in the air. He can finally go into a B-rank gate next. Suho's getting more adept at using ruler's authority in the middle of the fight too. He's rising both in levels and combat proficiency. Come to think of it, he only uses ruler's authority to move objects. But what if he uses this invisible hand in conjunction with his attacks? To test out the theory, he started wrapping the authority around his bare fists. As he reached the zenith of accumulated power, his eyes never left his target. He shot down like a falling comet, wrecking the bug's tough exoskeleton all the way to its insides. And with that, the defeat of the giant arachne is official. Suho leveled up once more, and even ruler's authority got an upgrade. He lay down on his prey and rested after accumulating a lot of fatigue. Since ruler's authority requires a lot of concentration, using that final move consecutively would be hard. He returned to the dungeon entrance while thinking of endless ways to utilize ruler's authority as a weapon. Beru was pleased to see the young monarch getting stronger. The shadow ant is also in charge of eating magic essence crystals. As for Essel and Gray, they did an excellent job collecting and dressing all the monster materials. Suho also discovered that he could sell the materials collected through the system window store. It was really convenient. Beru reckoned that by human hunter metrics, Suho's base form is close to becoming a B rank now. It's not a surprise, considering that he hit level 28 with a reasonably balanced spread of stats and skills. Also, the stronger Suho becomes, the stronger his companions become too. Essel could even feel her strength recovering bit by bit. That should not be possible without consuming blood. Aside from that, the two monarchs' heirs also gained a numerical level. Essel is level 19 and Gray is at 17. They're not players like Suho or the Shadow Monarch, so they don't see the levels and the standard system windows. While they can't invest their stat points freely, they should still get stronger with every level, right? The heirs and the teammate system are still a giant puzzle box that Suho needs to solve. Eager to experiment even more, Suho invited the gang to check out if Essel and Gray could level up too. They can always just do more raids after all. The thing is, they've already finished 2 raids today, and going on another would just be psychotic. Suho backed down and settled for just doing the daily cleanup quest in the Shadow Dungeon. Beru warned him not to get addicted to leveling. As soon as they stepped foot in the shadowy domain, a crimson-colored rift in space started sucking everyone in. The gang managed to hold on, but the mysterious gate inside the Shadow Dungeon emitting immense heat is an entirely unknown variable. Even Beru wasn't too sure if gates could appear in the Shadow Dungeon too. Suddenly the system pinged Suho for an urgent quest named the Dimensional Crack. He must enter the connected gate and remove the cause of the dimensional crack and fast. As soon as his eyes glazed over the urgent quest, an excited smile appeared on Suho's face. He quickly bought a few 10 gold heat-resistant robes from the system store and handed them to his comrades. This is perfect for Suho, as he's been itching to go on more raids anyway. Entering the gate brought them all the way to Egypt in a field-type dungeon called Pyramid Field. Lu Xing, a B-rank hunter from Asura Guild, is currently in a deadlock with another party. He complained that the newcomers should not order the Asura Guild around to leave the dungeon. But the villain with green and black eyes does not care about who came first. From now on, the dungeon belongs to his guild. If the Asura Guild continues to complain, the villain will take it as an outright declaration of war. Lu Hong is in a tough spot. Now, of all time, they actually ran into the infamous Scavenger Guild. To A-rank hunter Randolph and the Scavenger Guild, everything is meaningless in front of overwhelming strength. Aware that they would have to stand their ground, Lu Xing ordered his men to get ready for combat. Randolph remained calm, scoffing at the Asura Guild's foolish move. Just as the two opposing parties were about to clash against one another, a confused voice called their attention. Lu Xing and Randolph turned around to see a masked young man. Suho and his comrades have touched down in Egypt for some reason, and they didn't even know how, why, or where they were. 30 minutes ago, the gang came out of the gate expecting a hellish landscape, but they ended up in a sandy desert. None of them had ever been to a dungeon in the form of a barren desert. Beru instantly felt a strong magic power emitting from the pyramid. But there were some modern vehicles that seemed awfully out of place inside a dungeon. Cars and wire fences were parked and set up nearby. Machines don't work in dungeons, so why would there be human machinery here? Maybe they did not enter a dungeon but rather a gate that has crossed some sort of world boundary. As long as the previous gate remains in the Shadow Dungeon, there shouldn't be any issues, so Suho decided to investigate. He re-entered the Shadow Dungeon to check really quick. When he came back out a few seconds later, he grimly informed everyone that the gate had vanished. Not only that, but the C-rank dungeon they entered also started disappearing. This means the boss monster has been killed, but the hunters worry that the masked man hasn't come out yet. Not knowing what to do next, they hurriedly got in touch with the emergency contact. Back to the present, Suho and the gang have found themselves in the middle of a guild quarrel. They entered the pyramid and were just glad to find people inside. The vehicles parked outside probably belong to these guys. They're talking in English, so they might not be locals. Thankfully, Suho learned English for his university admission. So, he asked the stranger where they were. Lu Xing clicked his tongue at the sight of another hunter. After the Scavenger Guild, even Asian guilds are dipping in for the rights of the Pyramid Dungeon. Randolph dismissively looked at the young man, viewing him as nothing but another bug gathering in his territory. He recalled talking about an old woman's prophecy to an executive of the Scavenger Guild. The divination stated that a being born of death who broke the seal, the one who possesses the power to raise the dead, will appear in the grave. Right after the prophecy was given, the Pyramid Field-type dungeon appeared in Egypt. With pyramids being the most famous graves, the prophecy fits to the T. The executive ordered Randolph to secure the dungeon rights to raid it himself. If other guilds try to interfere, the way of the Scavenger Guild shall take over. Randolph gave Suho a last warning to leave while he was still being generous. But if this pyramid is a dungeon, the young monarch needs to clear it to complete the urgent quest. He asked what Randolph would do if he refused, and the mountain of muscle quickly drew his weapon. A massive hammer fit for an enormous frame came dangerously close to striking Suho. Essel, Gray, and even Liu Xing could only watch with bated breath. Unfortunately for Randolph, he might be strong and fast, but not strong and fast enough. Since he was attacked first, Suho should have the right to defend himself, right? Equipped with Vulcan's horn, he delivered a deadly haymaker straight to the beefcake's chest. Suho can't even tell how much damage he dealt after the increase in his strength. He even worried that he might accidentally kill the guy. But it looks like he is worrying about the wrong things. His attack only served to enrage Randolph as the brute retaliated with a punch of his own. Without any special gauntlets or anything, he sent the young man flying and crashing to the pyramid's walls. Randolph thought that the young man was going easy on him, so he took it personally. Big Bad Randolph finally ordered his men to cut everyone down. Essel and Gray rushed forward, ready to stand on business for the young monarch. Liu Xing gritted his teeth. At this point, the fight is inevitable. Suho dug himself out of the rubble and tried to catch his breath. In front of him are hunters fighting among themselves. To clear the urgent quest, he'll have to come out of this scuffle on top. Suho already marked the armored brute who attacked him as an enemy. He skillfully leapt back into the fray, keen on rejoining the fight. As soon as he landed, one of the Scavenger Guild soldiers immediately locked in on him. Anticipating the attack, Suho landed a disrespectful kick right into the soldier's face as a greeting. The disrespect was high, but the damage was low. The soldier reckoned that Suho was just a weak hunter who ended up being under the crosshairs of the Scavenger Guild. Suho's in a pinch. He tried to knock the enemy out with that kick, but it did not do nearly enough damage. These assholes are tough, so his only answer might be using the new combat method he's theorizing with ruler's authority. Which brings up a moral question. Can he really land such a devastating blow that can tear boss monsters apart on a human? What would he do if he killed another person by mistake? Those useless thoughts almost got him skewered if it was not for Liu Xing coming in clutch with the perfectly timed kill on the scavenger soldier. The soldier hit the sandy ground, stiff, bloodied, and lifeless. Suho extended his awkward gratitude. Liu Xing had seen his skills in the brief exchange against Randolph. He instantly knew that the kid was the real deal. But that hesitation Suho had a moment ago telegraphed that he's reluctant or even afraid of killing another person. Liu Xing advised that monsters aren't the only danger hunters face. If push comes to shove, Suho needs to have the resolve to protect himself against nefarious people like unofficial hunters. The young monarch thought that fighting with his life on the line would be enough. But that might not be the case. Up until now, he had never encountered a situation where he needed to kill a person. Against the Hyena Guild, he easily dominated those noobs with the overwhelming difference in strength. But Suho won't always be in a situation where he has the upper hand. Situations where not killing could result in death. Or worse, not being able to protect what you want. In the chaotic world of post-cataclysm, situations like this will continue to occur. The young monarch had been so tunnel-visioned on leveling up that he forgot that he had to throw away the feelings and values he had from before the world turned to shit. Only then will he be able to fight Li Min-sung. Liu Xing introduced himself and his guild to the young man. Since they're in a bit of trouble because of the tyrannical Scavenger Guild, Liu Xing proposes an alliance. Poor Liu Xing relaxed for 1 second and almost died from a sneak attack if it wasn't for Suho's quick reaction time. Equipped with Vulcan's horn, Suho planted his fist deep into another scavenger soldier's skull. He made sure to utilize the ruler's authority to bolster his destructive power. With renewed clarity, Sung Suho vowed to never hesitate in a life-and-death battle anymore. The first victim of his new outlook had his face broken and battered beyond recognition. Randolph took note of Suho beating a B-rank tanker half-dead with just one hit. He smiled in amusement as he looked at the young man once more. Suho properly introduced himself to Liu Xing and accepted the proposal for an alliance with the Asura Guild.